Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am your host. This voice will be doing it to you in your ear hole for the next 3 hours. That sounds very vulgar, but that's okay. We'll go with it. There are worse things on the net. I have a damn good show for you today. I have a full cast of characters. In fact, I had booked. In fact, I think I am booked into next week because many of the people didn't hit me back until like first thing this morning. And so I had to push them later on. So full show. We have Carl Jacques coming up first at 7 o'clock. There will be no monologue this morning. Jeremy Kuzmarov, he's going to get into the issues taking place in Russia. Later on, we have Angie Wong. And later on, beyond that, we have Peter Coffin. So we are going to have a really, really good show. Karja is going to be joining me in a few moments, actually, probably at 7:02. So definitely stay tuned for it. As I always give you my prep, my start. If you guys dig this show, if you guys dig this content, I am trying to grow this channel. My objective is 40,000 by Christmas, at least 40,000 by Christmas. For that, I am going to do my part in being consistent, giving you news, politics, commentary, international, domestic, all of that good stuff. That is my objective. That is what I'm going to do. My job is to have the best damn morning show in the history of morning shows. On the other side of it, to grow, to build, and to be consistent in doing it. So if you guys dig it, if you like it, share it, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Make sure you hit the notification bell on top of hitting the notification bell. The reason I say that is because I get a lot of people who say, I did not know you were doing a show, or I did not know you were live, or I never get your notifications. That's what I'm saying. Hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button if you dig the content and you want to find yourself back here often, every so often, on every blue moon, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you really dig it, if you're a super fan, consider PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, super chats. Any chat that is read, I would read, providing it is not racist, bigoted, et cetera, et cetera. Even if you take the piss out of me, more likely than not, I will read it. Let me know when Carl comes on, whether or not you guys, the volume and everything else is okay. I have worked diligently on the issue of volume. In fact, can you guys hear me now without any issue or without any difficulty? Any weirdness, any weirdness. Okay. I do not think there's any weirdness. And the interviews I did yesterday seem to come out okay without any echo or anything else. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Perfect. All right. There are several stories that are afoot, and some of those are actually fascinating. If you remember when Joe Biden came out and did this a few days ago, we are still dealing with the fallout of this today.
In Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of things is unconscionable, and it's un-American.
The only garbage I see out there are his supporters. I think it's unconscionable. I think it's unimaginable. Let's hear it one more time, just so you don't think I am hiding the ball. I'm fascinated by this clip. Let's play it one more time.
In Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of things is unconscionable.
Again, the only garbage I see out there are his supporters. So, Joe Biden attacks. The only garbage I see are his supporters. All right. So why is the New York Times saying this? Biden appears to insult Trump supporters as garbage, but quickly tries to clarify. He appears to say that. He didn't. He appears to say it. Did he appear to say it, or did he actually just call his people garbage? Let's play it one more time. Maybe I got this wrong. Maybe I didn't quite understand this correctly. Maybe Joe Biden just appeared to say it as opposed to actually saying it. So let's try it one more time. Biden appears to call his people garbage.
In Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Zionism constantly.
Nope, that's not an appear. That's him actually saying it. That's him actually saying it. And I'll go further with this. That is what Democrats think. That's what they think. It's not a situation, when they're saying these people are Nazis, these people are racist, Donald Trump is Hitler. What do you think they're trying to communicate when they're saying that? What's the context to which these guys are saying this stuff in? They're saying it because they actually mean it. Oh, we have our guest. There he is, the man, the legend, Carl Jha. How you doing, Carl? You doing all right this morning, man? Wait a minute, give me 1 second. Let me get you set up right with the volume. There we are. How you doing this morning, Carl? You doing all right?
Good. It's actually evening my time, but it's always good to see you, Jamal.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. I always get that straight. This American point of view. No, man, I'm glad you could join me, especially at somewhat short notice. I hit you yesterday, and you were very gracious and accepting. So thank you very much. How's it going there this evening so far?
It's good. Like I said, anytime you want to have me talk about China, I'm game, because this is my passion. I can talk about China forever.
Which so we can geek out on this all day. All right, so I want to make sure, I want to do a sound check before we start. Can you guys hear me okay? Is the volume loud enough between Carl and I? No issues so far? Come on, let me know. Excellent. All right, and just to give people who heads up on who I'm talking to, I'm joined with Carl Jha. He is host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and subscribe and support the podcast at patreon.silk and Steel podcast. Excellent. And everyone is giving me the all clear on the sound. So great. Carl, recently, North Korea had a missile test. Now, this was also in line where Russia also had a missile test, where they were testing their nuclear arsenal. But I want to go to North Korea for a bit. Why is North Korea having this kind of missile test? And apparently, it was one of their longest. I mean, the thing stayed in flight for like 58 minutes. Apparently, it was on a vertical trajectory more than anything else. Why is North Korea doing this? What were they trying to get across to the rest of the world, to South Korea, to their enemies, or broadly in general? What is this message?
Well, first of all, North Korea is a nuclear power now. We know they have tested nuclear devices. Now they are proven their delivery capability. So for North Korea, they don't need intercontinental missiles to hit Seoul. Their goal is not to target South Korea. They don't need ICBMs to hit South Korea. They don't even need ICBM to hit Japan. So this is not for this. They're not sending the signal to South Korea or Japan. They're sending signal to United States. And as people recall, there were several countries that were having nuclear program at one time. There was Gaddafi in Libya. There was Saddam in Iraq. Guess what happens after Saddam and Gaddafi got rid of their nuclear program? I mean, whereas United States, so far, they have been talking very belligerently about North Korea, but they never really made a move because North Korea has nukes. And now they have delivery capabilities. In fact, there has been several rounds of nuclear tests all around the world. As you mentioned, there was Russia tested them, North Korea tested them. China just launched an ICBM a couple months ago, towards South Pacific.
Yeah.
Everyone is now sending a signal to United States, like, look, okay, we're also nuclear powers. We also have the capability to deliver them. Don't just think that it's going to be one-way street. It's not like just like U.S. is going to hit China, North Korea, or Russia. No, we can hit you back.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what the signal they're trying to send. To remind U.S. don't do anything foolish.
Well, if you remember, I forget the person who said it, but at one point they made the point of saying the Gaddafi option in relation to North Korea. And you can imagine that North Korea flipped out. And, that's the problem in the US in general when dealing with and talking about North Korea. They act like he is belligerent, he's incompetent, he is unpredictable, he does the stuff for no reason, etc. And they always leave out the fact that we are having these tests with South Korea as if we were doing a decapitation strike, or North Korea, in which case they continuously freak out and say, cut it out. Trump was willing, despite all of the bellicosity and everything else when he first got in, to make a deal in this case. When Joe Biden gets in office, Joe Biden scraps it. They go back to standard, and all of a sudden the missiles start flying once again. What a mistaken opportunity. I would imagine on some level also that this is a demonstration to South Korea. I mean, there were provocations going back and forth between the two, where North Korea basically said that a drone from South Korea landed on North Korean territory. Am I getting that right?
Well, I mean, okay, like North Korea understands this correctly. This is not just between them and South Korea. South Korea's main military backer is United States. In fact, U.S. still militarily occupies South Korea. It has tens of thousands of troops on the Korean soil. And in times of war, all South Korean military has to answer to U.S. command. That U.S. takes over South Korean military in times of war. That's how it's laid out in the treaties. So this is why they are, by sending a signal to United States. By extension, of course, they're also putting on South Korea on notice, because the South Korean president has been, just debasing himself, trying to please his master in Washington. We all remember, that performance he put on, the musical show he put on in Washington when he saw Biden. And, and he was not very popular for that in South Korea either, because Washington tried to form this trilateral military alliance between South Korea, Japan, and U.S. to counter North Korea and China. But a lot of the people in South Korea are questioning, why are we forming a military alliance with Japan, our former colonizers? They didn't like that. And this was like very unpopular. But this is what U.S. is trying to push, shoving down the throat of South Korean people. We in the mainstream media in United States and much of the so-called collective West, when we talk, as you mentioned, when we talk about North Korea, we always say like, oh, their leaders irrational, they're crazy, they can't be reasoned with. This is the same reasoning they ascribe to Saddam, to Gaddafi, basically anyone the U.S. does not like and have plans for regime change. U.S. makes no secret about how they want regime change in North Korea. I mean, they said the same thing about Kim Jong-un's dad, also how he was a crazy dictator, that just has to go. And this is not how you conduct diplomacy, right? I mean, the U.S. actually had a nuclear deal with North Korea back in the Clinton era. The deal was that the United States will provide them with nuclear reactors. So in return, North Korea will give up their nuclear program. But under George W. Bush, under John Bolton, they pulled the rug straight out of that deal. U.S. backed out, put the sanctions back on. So that's why North Korea went ahead and exploded their nuclear device. And then, you have, as you mentioned, Trump went to meet Kim Jong-un, and then Biden pulls out. It shows that U.S. is not reliable. You can't seriously negotiate. How can you negotiate with somebody in good faith? And you're just one election away from all the deal being thrown out again.
Yeah.
Trump did that with the Iran deal, by the way, that the
Yeah, the
Obama
JC,
signed. So how
yeah, the
how can
JCPOA. Trump
anybody?
pulled out.
Yeah, how can
Iran stuck with the deal for another year. And of course, they increased sanctions, murdered Soleimani, et cetera, et cetera. No, you're absolutely right. It's amazing to me that these countries, whether it's Taiwan, which is part of China, or whether it's South Korea, would allow itself to be used as a pivot point for U.S. interests, especially Taiwan. You would think that looking at Ukraine, they could see the fate of proxies in regards to these wars, especially against a country the size with the economic and industrial base of China. It's super weird to me. The Taiwanese government, I'm curious what goes on in regards to the population itself, in regards to their point of view towards China, especially do they fully accommodate that what the US basically wants is to have a proxy and a pivot point against China and would use Taiwan to do it? Meaning, does the government fully get that? And does the population get that?
Well, I mean, people on Taiwan, they want peace. They don't want war. And I
Yeah.
have to remind people, the current sitting leader on Taiwan, he received he received a he did not receive majority of votes on Taiwan. He just received a plurality, and the only reason he won about 40% of the vote.
Mhm.
60% of the people voted for other candidates because it was a three-way race. So
Yeah.
the opposition was split. The opposition to his party was that other 60% was split between two candidates. That's how he won. 60% of the Taiwan population did not vote for him. He does
Mhm.
not have an overwhelming mandate at
I
all.
see.
And majority of people on Taiwan, they just want to have peace. They're perfectly
Yeah.
fine with status quo as is. Peace, trade with mainland China only helps the Taiwan economy. They want jobs. They just want people all across the world want. They want a better future for their
Better
children. They
life.
want a better educational opportunities. They want better lives. They don't want war. What U.S. is doing is actually very dangerous. They're ratcheting up tensions in Taiwan by pushing for all these arms sales. By the
Mhm.
way, nobody in Taiwan actually believes those arms sales directly helps Taiwan to defend itself from mainland China, because they are still they're still thinking, okay, we have to pay this as a protection money to the U.S.
Pretty much.
military industrial complex, so they will be friendly to us. That's how they see it.
Yeah.
Like, because a lot of the weapons they're buying doesn't even make sense. Like, they're buying Abrams tanks. Like, what the hell are you going to need Abrams tanks for on an island? By the time you need to use a tank, it's already too late. That means the PLA has already landed. So they are
This puts
being
them in
pushed.
of a mob deal. It's like, hey, that's a nice building you got there. It would be ashamed if anything happened to it. It's one of those things, right? And it's like, if you buy our weapons and up priced, by the way, those things are expensive. And I have a hard time seeing how it's going to defend against a country the size and industrial capacity of China. I just don't see how it works.
And United States do not sell top of the line items to Taiwan because they are afraid that those items could anytime be passed through the hands to mainland China if reunification happens. So they never sell
Yep.
the good stuff. They only sell the outdated but very expensive items. And they have openly talked about, in times of war, what they're going to do. They're going to bomb TSMC. They're going to bomb Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, the mainstay of Taiwan economy. So they say, well, we can't leave that to the communists. So if the war breaks out, we gotta blow up TSMC first. They talk about this publicly. How are they defending Taiwan? How are they helping Taiwan's cause? I mean, this is again, like, we have the example of Ukraine, like
Yeah.
a proxy war being waged against another of U.S. enemy, Russia, and Ukraine is being wrecked. People on Taiwan, they don't want to be wrecked like Ukraine. They can see what's unfolding Ukraine right now. It's just that U.S. has its own, it's supporting its own candidates on Taiwan. The current leader and his party, they're like more pro-U.S. than the other
Yeah.
parties, so they are the one who got the U.S. backing, and they serve a very useful purpose, which is ratchet up the tensions to continue to justify
Mm-hmm.
U.S. military presence in East Asia. That's all it's about. U.S. is all about maintaining its empire in East Asia, maintaining its military presence in South Korea, in Japan, in the Philippines, and the justification, Taiwan. Because
Yep.
China is aggressive, so we have to maintain all these forward postures. We have to maintain all the We have to put missiles in the Philippines. We have to put missiles in South
Mm-hmm.
Korea. But just imagine, and they're selling missiles to Taiwan right now. And just imagine if China have deployed missiles on Cuba. All the Washington will flip out. Back in JFK's era, U.S. almost nuked the world because the
Yeah.
Soviet put missiles on Cuba. But yet, U.S. now they think, they're saying we're helping preserving peace by selling this quote unquote defense missiles to Taiwan. How can missiles be defensive? it's ridiculous.
Yeah, this is some 1984 stuff, peace through war and all of this other nonsense. And that's the wild part about the Ukraine war, right? That we were willing to end the world in order to keep those missiles out of Cuba. Those missiles were already in Cuba, but either way, we were willing to end the world if they didn't get moved. I mean, we were willing to have a blockade and all that stuff. And then when they do the same thing in Ukraine, we're like, we don't understand why Russia is freaking out about this hostile military organization with this massive military being on the border of Russia. It's just bizarre. And now they're doing the same thing with salami slicing, one China policy. What is the relationship because the relationship between North Korea and Russia clearly has increased, especially after Russia warned South Korea, don't give missiles. South Korea says, okay, we're not going to give missiles, but we will give them to the US, in which case they would give them to Ukraine. All right. And then North Korea starts being brought into the fold of Russia. He takes Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un looks like a kid in a candy store, going all around Russia, seeing the missile capacity meeting. I get the sense that North Korea had a upgrade to their capability in this kind of asymmetric warfare that Russia may be thinking, if things come to the point of a war, where North Korea in a strategic partnership with North Korea may be on some level a strategic ally. What is the relationship? And the reason why I'm bringing up Russia first, I'm curious between the relationship between China and North Korea in lieu of the relationship between North Korea and Russia, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Russia, North Korea, and China, they all had a friendly relation stretch all the way back to the founding of North Korea back in 1940, right after World War II. After World War II, it's the Soviet Red Army that 1 million Soviet Red Army troops rode across the border. They pushed the Japanese Imperial Army out of Manchuria, out of Northern Korea. And at that time, United States State Department scrambled and said, please stop at 38th parallel. We don't want you to go any further. and Stalin agreed. They said, okay, we'll wait. We'll stop the Red Army at 38th parallel. We'll let the Japanese colonizer to hang out in the southern tip for a little while for the Americans to arrive. And that's what happened. The division of the Korea was not supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be like a Soviet occupation zone, U.S. occupation zone, the same like what happened in Germany. But then what happened was most of the people in Korea at the time, especially out of the resistance fighter who resist the Japanese colonization, they came together and they wanted to form the People's Republic of Korea. And United States was dead set against it because they're like, oh, they're all commies. They're all commies. We can't have that. So they supported their own candidate. A lot of them were straight out Japanese collaborators, and this is what eventually led to the Korean War. And both Soviet Union and China were firmly on the side of North Korea. The Chinese sent their 1 million man army into Northern Korea, and the Soviet later they provided air support in what's called the Mig Valley in the northern half of North Korea. So the secret air battle wasn't revealed until the collapse of the Soviet Union. Archives were open, but yes,
Yeah.
so Soviet Union and China always supported North Korea, and North Korea, they stay neutral during the Sino-Soviet split of 1960. So they're okay with both sides. So they maintain a friendly relationship with both China and the Soviet Union, and that friendship lasted through the Cold War. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia maintained the same friendly relationship with North Korea. So Russia and North Korea, they have the mutual defense treaty. Like the one side is obligated to come to the other's defense in case of war, and now they just have more reason to work closer together because the United States is putting screw on both countries, and North Korea just happened to have a huge stockpile of weapons. They have a huge, to prepare to defend them against possible U.S. launch attacks. They just happen to have a lot of conventional arsenal that's sitting around unused, and now they're shipping them to Russia, like especially artillery shells, which has been consuming very quickly on the Ukraine battlefront, and in return, Russia can help them to upgrade their missile technology. And
one more thing on that, and we have about 2 minutes. So there's this reporting in the West that the North Koreans are are in the Ukraine war, and this doesn't quite make sense, right? Because all things being equal, it's Ukraine that is running out of manpower. It's Ukraine that doesn't have the weaponry. I mean, Zelensky has been complaining about this. Not to mention, we've all seen the videos of them grabbing people on the street and throwing them in a truck and throwing them out on the front lines. But is it possible that the deal that was made was, we will give you shells, all of these things that you basically need for the war? Because, as you said, it's a war. It's World War II style war, updated to modern conditions. But was the deal for weapons for experience? Meaning, we haven't fought a war, meaning North Korea, we haven't fought a war in like 50 years, 60 years. And you are getting a ton of experience in regards to the Ukraine conflict. And so we want our people to get updated on procedures, methods, battlefield conditions, and those type of things. Not that they're fighting the war, but they're basically using Russia meaning Russian trainers, to understand technology, equipment, current battlefield. Is that what's going on? Because I don't buy for a moment that they need North Korean soldiers, nor do I buy that the North Koreans are out there fighting the Ukrainians.
So it's normal to have countries send observers into a third-party war in order to observe and learn the latest battle techniques. I mean, U.S. did that. And everybody does it, but right now, all the so-called evidence that's emerged about North Korea sending soldiers to Russia, all the ones I have seen are Laotian soldiers in the Russian Far East participating in the Laos 2024, the Laos Russia military exercise, and they just dub it. They just rip out the Laotian soundtrack and dub it in some Korean dialogue into it. That's the best evidence I've seen so far for so-called North Korean soldiers in Russia. So unless we see something more concrete, I'm gonna put a large bucket of salt into that claim.
Yeah.
Because, so far we haven't seen anything, concrete evidence to suggest there's even any North Korean military presence on the Ukraine war.
Carl, man, always appreciate your updates. And like you said, we can geek about this stuff all day. I agree with you. I'm fascinated with this because often we don't necessarily get the point of view of China in this country. We tend to demonize, especially world leaders who don't necessarily bow down. Carl Jha, host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and subscribe to the podcast on patreon.com, Silk and Steel. Carl, man, you have my deepest appreciation. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good one, man. All right. And I'm going to take a quick break. as I bring in my new guest or the next guest. He is here. So give me one moment to flip over, and I'll see you guys very shortly. Back shortly. Jeremy, can you hear me? And we are back. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. There we are. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys enjoy Carl. Love that guy. We have our next guest. My next guest is here. Like I said, we have a full show today. Let's have a conversation about what's taking place on the ground in Russia. Russia also, as Carl pointed out, had their nuclear missile tests. And I can't help but think that that missile test is telling the world to basically F off. Let's bring in our guest. We're joined with Jeremy Kuzmarov. Jeremy Kuzmarov. There we are. Jeremy Kuzmarov is managing editor for Covert Action magazine and author of several books on U.S. foreign policy. Jeremy, can you hear me? How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. I can hear you.
Excellent. Now, your screen is dark. Is it meant to be dark? I just want to make sure there's no visual or any weirdness.
Okay. I'm not sure the reason for that, but yeah.
Okay. Well, wait, that's what I'm asking you. Is it? Oh, I see. There you are. I can see you moving in the background.
Okay,
I see
let me
something
move
moving.
into a lighter area.
Yeah. It's like I see something moving in the background. I can't tell what it is.
Okay.
There you are. There you are. Much better. Much better. There you are.
Okay.
There's your face. How you doing, man? You doing
pretty good. How are you?
So far, so good. So far, so good. Wait a minute. Thank you for joining me, Jeremy Kuzmarov. Man, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you taking time to come on this morning, especially being so early in the morning. The first thing I want to get to, and I have to get to, the missile tests that the nuclear missile tests of all things that Putin effectively initiated. I think this took place a couple of days ago. I mean, I think it is self-evident, but what was the message and who was that message to? Meaning, why did he have a nuclear missile test at that moment? What was going on that necessitated, or at the very least that incentivized Putin to get across, leave us to our devices?
Well, I think you had the BRICS summit last week. I think that's a coalition of countries. Now they've asked. I forget the exact number, but significant number of countries are joining BRICS. Beside the original members. So I think that emboldened Putin that he's got a large coalition behind him. Yeah. Now there's North Korea. I mean, North Korea is developing kind of into a military powerhouse. So I think that's one backdrop, and I think the other is just the continued Ukrainian attacks into Russia, in Kursk. So I mean, he's saying, back off. I mean, we have nuclear weapons, and we have a coalition behind us. Don't mess with us. Basically, I think is what he's saying. And I mean, the
Is it
West is
possible
supporting
that
nuclear conflict.
what's going on, or what we're seeing, is that the Ukrainian military is getting weaker? Meaning, it is the ability for it to defend itself is just getting worse. It's losing missiles, or it's running out of weapons. It's running out of manpower. And in the old days, let's say like a year ago, it might take Russia months to take a particular territory. These days, it seems to be dropping. They may lose 2 over a weekend. Solidovol, if I'm not mistaken, you correct me if I'm wrong, was the latest that they basically took. Is it possible that whereas we may not necessarily know everything that's taking place on the ground, he knows, and what he knows is that they are crumbling, and that what he don't want or doesn't want is for either NATO or whether France or some of these other countries that get ahead of their skis and decide we are going to invade Western Ukraine. Basically, he is trying to head off any hothead that decides that they're going to take some action or some panic action by saying, look, don't screw with us. Basically, if you thought the special military operation was an issue, we are not joking. We are not bluffing. We will be at war with NATO if you take the wrong step. Is that what's going on? Meaning he full well understands that the Ukrainian military is getting weaker and is falling apart. And what he's trying to avoid or preempt is the West doing anything so belligerent and overt that it drags the war into a larger conflict. And so he is doing this as a warning.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment absolutely. And there are reports in our media, which is obviously very heavily pro-Ukraine, about desertion in the Ukrainian military and that young
Mhm.
men don't want to enlist. There was an article in the New York Times that they were young men were going to a concert in Kiev, and they were worried about being kidnapped into the army. That they don't want to join the army, and they were like, I don't know if what you would call recruiters or people there to kidnap them from that concert. And they don't want to go. So I mean, there's clearly a man, and we've had these articles that they've been kidnapping people on the streets
Yeah.
of Kiev. That young men are fleeing the country. There's obviously a big manpower problem in the Ukrainian military. A
Mhm.
huge number of Ukrainians have been killed. Youth don't want to join. They know it's certain death to join. So that's obviously a huge problem. I mean, how much longer can Ukraine sustain this? They've lost 20% of their territory. So I would agree with that assessment that Ukraine military is crumbling, and yeah, the danger. You're right. A more direct Western intervention. And I mean, history shows. The West has taken advantage of countries that don't have nuclear weapons, like Libya. And I mean, that's why North Korea developed nuclear weapons. That's the key deterrent. They would have been attacked a long time ago if they didn't develop their nuclear weapons. So Putin wants to make it clear. I agree with your assessment that he had these weapons, and it's
Mhm.
a danger that it's a red line that if the West tries something, yeah, he will use them. So
You know what's sad about this? I used to make a joke that Ukraine was dragging dancers off the dance floor of a disco. And come to find out, that's true. They've started to do it. And, all of these jokes, I guess, it's sadder commentary on more than anything else. My jokes are now no longer jokes. Even I used to do this thing, Democrats would support one concentration camp less, and now they're basically backing a genocide. My jokes at this point are no longer jokes. This reality. One of the other things that took place, Zelensky is freaking out. So apparently Zelensky threw a hissy fit. In fact, let me play the clip. He throws a hissy fit because his quote unquote victory plan gets outed by the New York Times. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I thought I had the clip. I thought I had the clip. Window. Okay, I'll just show the window. Let's do this. 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 Okay, maybe I do not have it up. At least I thought I had it up. Okay, we can skip. I'll find it. But basically, Zelensky throws a hissy fit. Now, he throws this hissy fit because apparently the New York Times outed that one of the secret provisions in his victory plan was that Tomahawk missiles be given to Ukraine. And it was supposed to be given to Ukraine in secret. So nobody was supposed to know that the Tomahawk missiles was given to Ukraine. And this was one of those things that I thought once before. I remember when I was talking to Mark about this, I was like, is it possible that the US just under the table gives permission? Well, whether they gave permission under the table or not, from Russia's point of view, it's the same thing, and they would end up in a larger war. I mean, does he have a right to be upset over this? I mean, like, meaning he is losing his mind that the rest of the world don't want to be in the Third World War, which is what the United States believes. I mean, the US even said so. It's escalatory, not to mention all of them thought his victory plan was delusional. This notion that they're going to drag Ukraine into NATO immediately, and that they're going to invoke Article 5 immediately, and that the rest of the world is supposed to go to shit for Zelensky. Just astonishing stuff. Give me your thoughts on this. I'm going to find the clip, but give me your thoughts while I look for the clip.
Well, from the beginning, the whole thing is perverse. I mean, if you want to go to war, I mean, you shouldn't have to beg other countries for weapons. I mean, it's your
Hmm.
war. There's a necessity of you going to war. Clearly, there was an outside agenda. Zelensky has been basically a puppet of Western powers from the beginning, because he was totally reliant on their support for this war in Russia, which has proven to be a total disaster for his own people. He decimated his own country. He's caused the death of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, Ukrainian youth, caused the loss of a lot of his own territory. And the whole time he's just been begging outsiders. I mean, Ukraine didn't have the capability on its own to sustain this war. They provoked the Russians, and for years he's been begging these outside powers to give him weapons. And I mean, the stupidity of our population has allowed this, has allowed our leaders to give billions of dollars of our money to this. I mean, he's running a petty tyranny in his country. He's banned 12 opposition parties. He's killed many of his opponents. Uh, why have we given billions of our dollars when we have serious problems here at home that need addressing? Billions of dollars into a sinkhole, into a petty tyrant, in a country that had no hope of winning the conflict against a bigger power. And
And
it's
by the way,
just,
blow off elections. They've blown off elections. I
yeah.
mean, can't even use the term democracy. So here's the clip. This is Zelensky losing his mind. Let's see if I can make this larger.
Package of long distance weapon, and we will use it only if Russia will not stop the war and will not stop
Okay, for some
continuing
reason I
escalation.
can't
I
get
said this
volume
is a
on this, but that's okay. You can
prevention
see
method.
Zelensky freaking out.
They said to me,
Okay, I can't get volume on
this
this,
is
but that's okay.
escalation.
You can see Zelensky freaking out
When
and losing his mind, basically. And to be clear, his point was this was supposed to be a secret. Nobody was supposed to know. And I mean, there's even something problematic with that. How on earth do you think you're going to hide this from Congress, from Russia, from the rest of the world, as if Russia is not going to know that it's getting hit by Tomahawk missiles and that the United States would have had to give permission, either de facto or in earnest, for them to do so? Zelensky is out of his mind. Delusional is right.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is delusional. Did he really think that a country like Ukraine could take on and defeat the Russians? Uh, and I mean, look what's happened. And at some point, I mean, the Ukrainians are going to take retribution on him. I mean, he's basically ruined his own country.
Yeah.
And he's prostituted the country to outside interests and powers, and basically turned over also the whole economy. That didn't get a lot of publicity, but he's turning over the whole economy to foreigners and foreign interests. And this Ukrainian reconstruction agency is headed by Penny Pritzker, and it's designed to get Wall Street to just buy up Ukraine's economy. And he's passed a lot of regressive labor laws to screw over Ukrainian workers. So he's just screwed over his own people in every way. I don't know how long they're going to continue. I mean, we see with these reports, the youth don't want to fight in the war.
Right.
At some point, there's going to be a mutiny within Ukraine because inevitably Russia, I mean, is taking over a huge portion of their country. And I mean, at some point, probably very soon, Ukraine realizes we can't fight anymore. I mean, so and they'll turn on Zelensky, and he may have to flee. Who knows what'll happen? But it's been a catastrophe, and it's also a shame on the Western country that we've allowed this to go on. That there wasn't enough opposition to other stupidity on our part. That we've threatened a nuclear war, and we've devoted our treasures to a totally morally bankrupt cause, and they made this into some righteous cause. You have all these liberals with their Ukraine flags, that this is this great moral cause of a generation. When again, it's this petty tyrant who's risking a nuclear war, who's going to be overthrown by his own people soon, who's ruined his own country. and we have these liberal figures who are supposed to be for human rights and working people, and meanwhile all the money is going into weapon systems and not into our schools,
Mhm.
and to programs that are needed in our inner cities, to create a more decent society here.
Well, that's the wild part. And because I want to stick with Zelensky for a bit, I think philosophically, ethically, morally, even, a leader of a country has a responsibility to the people of that country. Meaning, even if you're a coup regime, any of those things, the idea that you're going to use your country as a proxy and get hundreds of thousands of people killed, you're losing territory, none of this stuff needed to take place. Minsk agreements 1 and 2, the Istanbul agreements, all of those things would have resolved it. But that's not what they wanted, and we were, duplicitous the entire way through. From Zelensky's point of view, though, I part of me is somewhat sympathetic, but part of me hates the guy. And the reason why I say that is the U.S. at some point went to him and said, "Look, we'll give you anything that you need. We'll give you all the backing. We'll give you all the money. We'll give you all the weapons. We're going to be with you for as long as it takes. We're going to bring you into NATO. We're going to do all of these things." Meaning, they were making love to his ear hole for years. And if you were Zelensky and you're hearing all of these promises, all of these sweetheart deals, all of the stuff like all of the West, clearly all of the West and NATO can fight and beat back the Russians. And somewhere along the way, it dawns on you, oh my God, this is not true. And not just this is not true, they're getting tired of you, meaning you're an international panhandler going around begging people for money. It's aggravating, right? Every time you're like, give me money, I need more money and weapons. None of it's working. And yet he continues to do it. So I get how he would be annoyed by this notion that he has to continuously beg for something that he was told he was going to be freely given, and that all of the promises of what was going to take place, how this was going to, we're going to destroy the Russian economy, we're going to destroy the Russian military, none of the stuff came to pass, which is why I think you're getting these reports out the West calling him messianic, saying he's delusional, saying he's untethered to reality, all of the stuff. And why I think he looks so out of his mind in some of the most recent interviews. From your point of view, where I am I'm I'm unclear on how to sense whether or not it's a situation where the Ukrainian military just collapses, making on the battlefield, and they say, okay, we're done. Whether it's a situation where there's a diplomatic agreement. I don't know why Russia would sign another one of those, considering Minsk 1 and 2 and considering what happened with the Istanbul agreement. So there's that, but who knows? Or whether or not they allow the country to just fall, meaning where the West allows and pushes Zelensky to keep fighting, to keep dragging in people, forcing Russia to take the entirety of Ukraine, and then go for another decade of guerrilla war in the West, which I would not put it past the West, considering they don't really care about Ukrainians. I mean, the argument we've been making in the West is, well, that money is going to our weapons contractors, despite the fact that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are being killed. Which of those outcomes do you think is more likely, or do you have another idea on what might take place?
Hmm. Yeah, those are good assessments. You're right. I mean, I think the United States doesn't care yet, and history shows that they just use people for their own agenda. I mean, in this agenda, I think the agenda was to try and weaken Russia, and have a pretext for ratcheting up sanctions
Right.
that would destroy the Russian economy, and then they wanted to fuel a revolt against Putin, who they don't like because he's more of a nationalistic leader. He
Yeah.
reasserted whatever his flaws, he reasserted more Russian national control over their economy from the period of Boris Yeltsin, who was
Hmm.
allowing the West and these oligarchs to just seize control of the economy. So that was the agenda, and it seemed to have backfired because Putin's been able to offset the sanctions by fortifying his alliance with the Chinese, by with this BRICS that I was discussing, and now
Yeah.
he's taken a lot of Ukrainian territory. So Russia has not actually been weakened; they've been strengthened. So I don't know. I think there may be difference here between the Democrats and Republicans. I mean, I think if Trump gets in,
Right.
we might see, move toward an end game, that he's going to transition to a focus on China. China is seen as a bigger threat. I mean, China is now a formidable economic power, is
Oh
threatening
man, yeah.
American global dominance, certainly over the world economy. So I think the Trump forces would potentially sign some kind of agreement to end the enterprise and move toward the focus on China, where I think the Democrats are zealous anti-Russia hawks, the people
Mhm.
behind the Democratic Party. So they would probably carry out the scenario you're discussing. They would continue to support some kind of low-intensity warfare operations in Western Ukraine, even if Russia is able to consolidate control over Eastern Ukraine. Now that might take a long time. So that may be part of the playbook, is that even though they're losing, they just want to bleed the Russians, and
Drag
they
it
know
out.
it'll take a long time for them to consolidate control over Eastern Europe. And then, yeah, the weapons contractor continue to make huge amount of money if this war goes on. They don't care if ultimately Ukraine is greatly weakened. It is somewhat of a loss for them, but they're still making money off this enterprise, so they don't care that much.
Um, uh, so there are two stories. Yeah, we have time. I think we have time. Um, yeah, bleed the Russians. Basically, kind of like Syria. It's like we don't have to admit that we lost if we just hang on. Meaning, we have no chance of winning. We have no chance of changing the situation, but we would steal the oil, steal the wheat, and we just linger. That nonsense. I guess Lavrov pointed out recently, though, a draw is not what he's looking for. Basically, that doesn't settle our concerns. So I guess we'll see. Either way, they clearly don't care about the Ukrainians for all the talk about doing it for Ukraine. One of the other things, the security agreement between Russia and Iran. So Lavrov came out recently, I think it was yesterday, in fact, and pointed out, let's see if I can find it. This. So Lavrov is saying an updated partnership agreement between Russia and Iran is set to be signed soon, a particular focus on defensive matters. Russian Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov announced on Thursday, quote, a major factor in strengthening Russian and Iranian relations will be the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between Russia and Iran that is being prepared for signing soon. It will confirm the parties' desire for, quote, closer cooperation, whatever that means, in the field of defense and interaction in the interest of peace and security in region and global level. Now, I guess my question is, what does that mean? Do we know anything at all about what potentially is going to be in that partnership, or for that matter, how far that partnership goes? I mean, right now, Iran is trading fire back and forth with Israel. Iran is teasing the fact that they're about to launch, apparently, on Israel for their last attack. Has anything been leaked about what's supposed to be in this partnership?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know the specific details, but this is very significant. Along
Yeah.
with this BRICS conference, we see a growing alliance against the United States and Israeli aggression in the world. Although the
Hmm.
danger that this will lead to a world war, that these conflicts are becoming more intertwined. If Russia, if the U.S. is at war via proxy with Ukraine, and now they're at war, supporting Israel's war in Iran, and Russia joining forces with Iran, an escalation in Iran, could draw in the Russians
Yeah.
to protect Iran, just like they protected Syria, and you could have a world war. Although I'm not sure how much the American public, I mean, has kind of tuned out and has acquiesced to these bankrupt policies that we've been describing. However, if a hot war breaks out and they have to reimpose a draft in the United States, I think that's when you'll start to see major protests and riots on campuses
Yeah.
and in American cities, and it may become politically untenable for whoever's in power to
Yeah.
carry out this escalation, because Americans are not going to want to send their kids to die in these conflicts, especially when they develop a better understanding of how these conflicts originated and how the U.S. helped provoke these wars. That's the only saving grace, perhaps. But
Well,
otherwise,
to
this
be
looks
fair,
like
Jimmy, that
a
part wouldn't
world
come up.
war.
Meaning they would, we don't give context when we are fighting in these conflicts. Like Bush said, they hate us for our freedoms. has nothing, like, meaning they don't go, look, our media runs with a triumphalist point of view that if America is doing something, by definition that we're doing it, it is right. And it doesn't necessarily matter even what it is all that much. If we're doing it because it's the right thing. It's about freedom, it's about justice, it's about democracy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any context for it gets dropped. So when, for example, when Bush was talking about 9/11, well, they hate us for our freedoms. That's why. Or when there's torture, this is enhanced interrogation. Or when Russia goes into Ukraine, this is an unprovoked war of aggression. Like, this is the way they talk about it. It's propaganda dripping through every word. And not just dripping through every word, the media effectively repeats it, especially if it's in the context of a foreign country. And then on top of that, they demonize, meaning they would take a country like Russia and they would boil it down to one person. And they would say that person is just a complete dictator and has complete power to do any and everything that they want. And that this is not about 80 to 85% of the Russian public that fully agrees with this perspective because the stuff is happening on the border. So I don't know. I mean, I agree with you that a draft would be deeply unpopular. I mean, if you think back to Vietnam, people were freaking out. And that is after that, we've gone, what, 40 years since Vietnam, 50 years, something like that, some insane amount of time, 70 years without a draft where only 2% of the country's in the military. Yeah, I agree with you. All hell would break loose if they tried to do something like that. On the other front, to go back to Zelensky for a bit, when he was freaking out in that press conference where he was throwing a hissy fit, one of the things also in that, I believe in the same interview, he was talking about the Kursk operation. And he points out where Russia is weak. And they were so weak that if we wanted to get to the power plant, to the nuclear power plant, we could have done it and they couldn't do anything to stop us to do so. Okay, this is outlandish. The reality of it is they got bogged down in one of the other territories and they were basically stopped. And he's trying to insinuate that, well, we don't attack nuclear power plants. This is completely farcical considering they were bombing Zaporozhye power plant, correct?
Yes, they were, and it
Yeah.
showed there were major war crimes committed by the Ukrainian military, and I don't know why this didn't arouse the anger of people in the students like who protest the Israel Gaza were totally silent, and totally a lot of them at least totally silent about horrific thing that Ukraine has done with American weaponry, including,
Yeah.
as you say, bombing nuclear facility that could unleash a major catastrophe like a Chernobyl. Uh, so, and the other hand, the other level, yeah, is that Zelensky is, I mean, totally delusional, just like other powers who've taken on the Russian before. I mean, nobody learns
Yeah.
from history. A
Bro.
country like Afghanistan and Russia, they're constantly invaded throughout their history, and they know how to defend themselves, and their population are very patriotic and will mobilize to defend their country at whatever the cost.
And by the
And
way, real quick, and through Ukraine. Like, off the time, when the Nazis invaded, even in the Second World War, if I remember, I mean, the First World War, they went through Ukraine. Like, Ukraine was always the tip of the spear in order to get to Russia. If I'm not mistaken, even the Napoleonic Wars went through Ukraine. Ukraine is a big deal from the standpoint of Russia's security. We completely ignore it.
yeah, and the U.S. was messing with Ukraine, from the time of the
Yes.
2014 Maidan coup, or since the fall of the Soviet Union. Victoria Nuland admitted that the U.S. had pumped in $5 billion into Ukraine. And I mean, that just poisoned U.S. Russian relation. There was some hope with the end of the Cold War that a new era of history could develop with peaceful and cordial U.S. Russian relations, and that would pave the way for a new era of peace. But then you have, and I argued in my book about Bill Clinton. I looked at Clinton's Ukraine policy, and he
Mhm.
set that in motion, the poisoning of U.S. Russian relations, and set the groundwork for this new Cold War, which is escalating in a very dangerous way, just like the original Cold War led up to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it was his administration that started pouring in huge amount of money into Ukraine to try and pry it away from the Russian orbit. and Russians took notice of that, and that was a real threat from their point of view. And that policy was escalated under the Obama administration when it overtly backed that coup against the pro-Russian leader Viktor Yanukovych, and that has set in motion these events that has led us to today, where we're potentially on the brink of nuclear war or world war, and where so many people have gotten killed senselessly.
Yeah. Um, One thing before I let you go, one, it's funny. We've had these debates in this country, like the political debates and whatnot, town halls. I think we had one debate between Trump and Kamala. Very rarely does stuff like this bubble up. Donald Trump, it's been a very strange conversation that's been taking place because Harris would hit Trump like, oh, he's palling around with dictators. Now, uh, okay, whatever. But on top of the palling around with dictators, Donald Trump never really deals with this directly, meaning he never goes and hits it and says, well, we shouldn't be in that war, or that war was started because of so and so. He always does this kind of around the way, I'm going to end the war, I'm going to end the war, without necessarily detailing how it started, why it started, etc. One of the things he did point out, though, was that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran have started to form a worrying alliance based on us, and that's something that needs to be regarded in regards to foreign policy. And I suspect that partially informs his notion that we got to end the war. There's a tax on the dollar. None of the stuff is helping us, et cetera, et cetera. Meaning, whether he fully understands chapter and verse about what's taking place, he seems to have these kind of instincts of like, hey, it seems the rest of the world is organizing against us, that they're being pushed together. Now, I don't think that he fully understands his own arrogance or his own ego or any of the stuff, but he does seem to, at the very least, get it. I don't see that awareness in Democrats at all. Like, it's not something that comes up. It's not something that they deal with directly. It's not something they even address. If anything, as you pointed out, they're Russophobic to the hilt. Hillary Clinton goes along with this notion of Trump and Russia, which seeds this poison into the American electorate, specifically into the Democratic Party. And they tick on without really dealing with the fact that you are bringing us to the brink of a third world war. I got to be honest, I am deeply concerned. Like when people talk about, well, Donald Trump is a wild card, he is a wild card, and he's unpredictable in regards to what he's going to do. But I think Democrats is every bit as much of a wild card, if not worse, especially on the issue of foreign policy, considering they just don't seem to believe in any level of negotiations on real terms. Either you're a vassal or we're at war. There's no middle ground in between those things. Do you see that changing? Like, meaning, do you see, let me ask you this. If it was between Trump and Harris, who do you think the Russians would actually want? I'm super curious on this point because I remember Mark made the point of saying it's very possible that they would prefer Harris because A, she's predictable, and B, they can resolve this issue, whereas Donald Trump would pressure them to come to a deal. Meaning he may be open to a deal in a way where they can't necessarily say no, whereas with Harris, they can at the very least resolve the conflict and make additional gains um, in the way that they want to make gains on the conflict on the battlefield. What are your thoughts?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure about that, what the Russian would want. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Harris. I mean, it could be that they feel they're winning the conflict and they're going to end the
Mm-hmm.
conflict on their terms.
Mm-hmm.
And look, Putin's popularity has actually increased as a result of this conflict. So politically, it hadn't been so bad for him. I mean, war is sometimes a way to unify a population and avert attention from any domestic problem and
Agreed.
inequality. And in this case, they can say that it's a justified war because we were provoked into it, that the U.S.
Right.
backed this coup on our border and attacked us. So, yeah, they may be fine with the status quo. Yeah, Trump, yeah, for all this, fanfare and obsession with this alleged relationship between Putin and Trump,
Pretty
because
much. Yeah.
they were trying to claim, Trump that Trump contacted Putin 17 times since he left office. But I mean, this seems to be much ado about nothing.
Yes.
And I mean, Trump was pretty anti-Russia too. When he was president, I mean, he ratcheted up. He provided, that was before the special military operation commenced, the
Yep.
Obama administration had refused to provide Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, but Trump provided that to Ukraine, and he tore up a lot of agreement. These arms control agreement, like the major agreement signed in the late '80s, the INF
Well, that
treaty.
was because he brought that lunatic John Bolton into his administration.
Yeah, he
John
put
Bolton doesn't
Bolton
believe in
in, so
agreements. From John Bolton's point of view, the United States is supreme. We have a stronger military. And because we are supreme and we're strong, any deal that is made is effectively us taking the shorthand of the stick because we are militarily stronger. And I suspect that a lot of the stuff was because of the Trump and Russia stuff, where Donald Trump wasn't able to go with his natural instincts. Meaning, if you're screaming, Trump is working with the Russians, Trump is working with the Russians, and you have this pressure that is being applied to the campaign. And it's like, well, Donald Trump won't give missiles because he's working with the Russians. Okay, here are the missiles. Donald Trump won't pass sanctions because he's working with the Russians. It's that nonsense. Meaning, do you think that was just his thinking? Or do you think he was more pushed by the political winds to go in that direction? Because that's going to make that's going to be a big deal if he wins again going into his administration in regards to what is he going to do? Where is his, let's say, natural political inclination?
yeah. Well, with Trump, it's hard to know what his natural political inclination is. I think he's just
Yeah.
a showman who will say, I don't think he has cleared any clearly defined principles. He'll just say one thing one day, and part it's like a political ploy because he wants to, there is a sector of the electorate who does want to de-escalate this conflict.
Hmm.
So he'll give some statements that indicate he's on their side. And this is a familiar tactic of politicians. Bill Clinton was a master at this. He'd give a speech in the morning, to a labor group and make them feel like he's on their side, and then he'd go to the business council,
The
and
same
that's where
thing.
he needed the money, and he would say exactly what they wanted. So Trump's kind of the same. I mean, for all the hysteria about Trump, he's in many ways just like a typical politician who, talks to win over support from different groups. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, he served the war complex and big business elements. And if they want to escalate, if they want to continue this conflict in Ukraine, he's going to continue it. And he represents, yeah, he brought in all the neocons in his inner circle like Bolton. So he's really going to, I think both parties will advance the agenda of the neoconservatives and the military industrial complex. The only question with Trump is, will he fall through on some of his rhetoric of trying to end the conflict in Ukraine so he can focus on China?
Yeah.
That there is a question that he could do that, and for that reason, the Russians may have more hope with Trump. But you make a good point that they may be happy, they may be confident that they're winning this conflict and that they can wrap it up in the next year or two. So it doesn't matter who's in the White House in that
Yeah.
respect.
Jeremy Kuzmarov, man, absolutely appreciate you joining me. Thank you for this, Jeremy. Jeremy Kuzmarov, he is managing editor for Covert Action Magazine and author of several books on U.S. foreign policy. Jeremy, thanks, man. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Have a
All
great
right,
day.
guys, I am going to take a quick break. Um, I'm going to take a quick break and we're going to come back. I'm going to go through some of the chats. Like, share, subscribe. Back in a moment. I am back. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. My name is Jamal Thomas, and this is my show. For the next 2 hours, I will be the voice that is in your ear, and I appreciate you allowing my voice to be in your ear. Before I start, I want to give a shout out to some of the chats. So there's this Sabby Sabs from Blackout Network, I believe, gave you a shout out last night on her podcast. Shout out to Sabby. Shout out to Sabby. She's been on our show a few times. Always love her as a guest. She is more than welcome to come on this show anytime she wants to come on this show. She has a great voice, and I always appreciate talking to her. So Sabby is fantastic. Sabrina, I believe is her name. Fantastic. Fantastic. She was geeking. I saw her going back and forth with someone recently, but she's on my Twitter thing, and I do follow her commentary and stuff like that. She's damn good. So shout out to her. We also have Nut 716. Nut 716. I don't see a Kirk and Spock on that wall. Just teasing. Actually, right here. Kurt, Spock, and myself. So take that, sir. Kurt and Spock is on that wall. Classics, right? Can't have Star Trek without Kurt and Spock. You know, this is you done got me to you brought up the Star Trek thing, so don't blame me for this. But you know, one of the best episodes of Discovery was trash. Discovery was trash. But one of the best episodes of the Christopher Pike version of Star Trek, what is it named? Strange New Worlds, I believe they call it. There's this episode where Pike, when they do a piggyback, it's almost like a prequel of the episode with Kirk and the Romulans, where they're having this submarine warfare type thing. And they show what would have happened if Pike was in that situation as opposed to Kirk. And he takes it, it goes to shit in a heartbeat. Because what Pike tries to do is to make friends. You know, we don't have to be enemies. We can bring this to a close. I can understand my enemy can understand me. And if I'm willing to extend myself, then maybe the enemy would extend himself based on my extension. And in some situations that works, no issue. In other situations, you will be taken advantage of, which is exactly what happened to Pike. He was taken advantage of, and it all went to hell, in which case they had to go back through time and let Kirk take it over again. It was just fascinating. Look, to go back to what Jeremy and I were talking about in the Zelensky clip. Zelensky is flipping out, and he's having this hissy fit meltdown. And again, I get it on some level. If you are Zelensky, 2014 overthrow the government of Ukraine, the Yanukovych government. All right. Now, the CIA had been working in Ukraine for years. All right. Even the New York Times knows it. They had infiltrated Ukraine for a very long time. Now, that doesn't even get into Newland, the various Congress members, all that stuff. They wanted Yanukovych to accept a deal that was not in the best interest of Yanukovych. They wanted him to move and take this deal from the European Union. Russia was also offering a deal at the same time. The catch is the deal with the European Union was a crappy deal. This, being on the marquee, created a division in Ukraine. Also, the NATO membership that was extended in 2008 also created a division by ethnic Russian Ukrainians that were in the East and the more Western in the West. The ones in the West, many of those people were rabidly racist. There's that. And so you can see how these divisions were being stoked in the country over time. William Burns, in his memo, Net Means Net, makes it very clear that by offering NATO membership to this country, we are creating divisions in the country that may provoke a civil war that Russia does not want to get involved in, but because it's happening on their border, they will be forced to do so. This is the same William Burns that is CIA director today, prescient back then. That same Burns, for whatever particular reason today, is unclear on this stuff. I suspect he's not unclear at all. He's just doing his job and is just hiding the ball. Fair enough. My point is, from Zelensky's standpoint, if you're told, look, I know you came in on a peace ticket, that's not going to happen. Not only is that not going to happen, we will give you all the money, all the weapons. You would have the full backing of the West. Russia is just a country masquerading, or a gas station masquerading as a country. Look at our economies. Clearly, we have the capability of giving you the money, weapons, training, equipment in order to beat the Russians. We will crush that country with economic sanctions, and you will crush them on the battlefield. It is a win-win relationship. This is clearly something you should do. We will not give you security guarantees for this Istanbul agreement, but we will back you to the hilt militarily. We will be with you for as long as it takes. Now, if you're told that, and you're continuously told that, you might be a little peeved that you have to beg continuously for more money and for more weapons. And you may even be a little bit peeved that they are annoyed by the fact that you're doing so. Now, to be fair, though, if you're running around the world as a panhandler and you're, but give me money, give me money, give me money, it becomes that nonsense, right? Who the hell wants to deal with somebody who's doing that? Bad English asking for money. Nobody. By the same token, again, if you're Zelensky, you can imagine you may feel some kind of way that you were led down the garden path, or the primrose path, as they say, into this shit and piss world where hundreds of thousands, 500,000-600,000 dead Ukrainians in a war that they are not just losing, but their ability to fight back has lessened over time, to the point where they're demoralized militarily. One of the Ukrainian generals came out in a story and flat out said, our lines have collapsed. Our front has collapsed. We're screwed. My question is, how far does this go? Which is the thing that fascinates me. Do we get to the point where, because we don't care about Ukraine, because we don't really care, these aren't Americans that are dying. I know there was an American that died, but under normal circumstances, these are not Americans that are basically dying. This is a proxy that is getting crushed in a proxy conflict. Now, let's be very clear. This started as a civil war. Russia ends up getting involved in that civil war, but it started as a civil war. Does the U.S. look at this and say, it is better for us if there is no deal? Not just there is no deal. We force Russia to take the entirety of Ukraine, West included. And we force them to do that because what we know is that it will bog them down into years of civil conflict, meaning they will be in guerrilla wars in the West year and year and year on end. So even though we're going to lose militarily, ultimately we can still bleed the Russians in this type of guerrilla war conflict. I have no idea. I mean, we're talking about very cynical stuff at this point, where we're intentionally allowing all of these people to die for our own geopolitical interests because we don't necessarily want to own up to the fact that we effectively lost. And again, the geopolitical implications for this is enormous. As I pointed out 2 years ago, the issue with Ukraine goes beyond Ukraine into this kind of geopolitical sphere of, does the US, and for that matter, broadly speaking, the West, still have the capability of flexing its muscles in a test of strength, yay or nay? And if that answer is no, then what does it mean for the NATO organization in and of itself, that they've been around for 50, 60 years, and within the context of a couple of years in a high intensity war, A, they're tapped out of weapons, and B, their proxy is getting crushed. What does it mean? What does it mean? This is Zelensky losing his mind that elements or parts of the victory plan were revealed, specifically the Tomahawk missiles. This was supposed to be a secret provision that was in the victory plan. And the secret provision was basically that the US gave under the table these Tomahawk missiles, not tell anybody about the fact that they gave the Tomahawk missiles. And I suppose that what he wanted to do was fire those missiles at Russia, I suppose in a clandestine way, as if Russia is not going to know that the US, A, gave them the missile, and B, gave permission, whether passively or actively, to fire those missiles. The US called this, well, for one, escalatory. Two, said he's delusional about this victory plan. Because understand, It's super ironic to call a plan the victory plan when the plan gets across that you have lost. Meaning, if the only plan for me to win this conflict is for me to drag the world into a third world war, then that is evidence that I've lost. His argument is, in order to achieve victory, we need to be able to fire long-range strikes in Russia. There's that, which right off the bat, at war with NATO. And B, you need to let me in NATO immediately, in which case he's going to immediately invoke Article 5 with this belief that, A, I suppose the Russians are not going to continue if they're invited into NATO. I suspect what the US knows, what Germany knows, and many of these other countries know, especially the larger ones, that's not the case. Russia will proceed with accomplishing their military objectives. And the only difference now is that nuclear powers are at opposite sides of an active and hot war. I would imagine, at the very least, that is not necessarily something they want to get involved in now, even though they may get involved in it later. I'm not overtly optimistic. We're not dealing with Kennedy and Khrushchev, meaning the political dexterity of these two. We're dealing with an addled, mentally incapacitated Joe Biden. In fact, there are no good world leaders in the West. All of these people are lunatics. This is Zelensky in his full-blown hissy fit. How are you telling people about my weapons? There's no confidential things among partners. This was supposed to be a secret. How dare the New York Times release this information that I wanted Tomahawk missiles and that I wanted to potentially fire those missiles into Russia. There is no secrecy among partners. Oh, there's no audio? What? Let's see. Let's try it again. Hold on. There's no audio on that video. Okay, why is there no audio on that video? Let's try it one more time. And why is there no audio? Why is there no audio? 1 second. Because I can hear it just fine. Maybe there's something weird going on. 1 second. Huh. All right. Yeah. All right. There may be something going on with a combination between sharing the video. I'll work it out. I'll figure it out. I figure out what's going on. I suspect that trying to... Oh, I know what it is. All right. Let's try it one more time. All right. This. Yeah, because potentially firing off missiles into Russia is a prevent. Sure, it is. And Russia is totally going to accept that as Russia is totally going to accept that. Yeah, Russia is totally going to accept that as preventative and not necessarily escalate the conflict further. I think what he really needs to accept is that they've lost and that the West has other priorities at this point, especially on the issue of Israel. And what they don't want to do is end up in the Third World War on behalf of Zelensky. Yes, they would work with you when you're dumping money into the country, but at the point where it's like there's no potential to win it, and not just no potential to win it, do we really want to go to a Third World War for a conflict that we can't win? He feels some kind of way about it. I get it. I understand why he feels some kind of way about it. But dude, you decided to be a proxy. You allowed your country to be used this way. How are you flipping out? How are you pulling this diva moment at this point? But look, let's take a quick break. Angie Wong is going to be joining us very soon. In fact, she's going to be joining us at 8:30. So I'm going to be prepared and set it up for her. Were you guys able to hear it the last time? That is important to me because I want to make sure you can hear the clip. And I think I know what's going on. Smooth point. I think I know what's going on. Stay tuned. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Like it, share it, subscribe. Definitely hit the notification bell. Oftentimes people tell me they didn't get the notification, so definitely hit the notification bell. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be back in a moment. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. It is about 8:30 a.m. in the Washington, D.C. area. This voice will be in your ear hole going for the next hour and a half. Good show so far. We've had a full show. Jeremy Kuzmarov, Carl Jha, Angie Wong will be coming up shortly at around 8:30. In order to preempt Angie Wong, though, when she comes on, the fallout from Joe Biden calling people trash is still going on. Now, just in case you were living under a rock and you didn't hear the comments, the other day, when after the Madison Square Garden speech that Donald Trump put on, it was almost like a mini RNC convention. All right. Many Democrats went with this idea that Donald Trump is a Nazi, Donald Trump is a fascist. His supporters, Hillary Clinton went so far as to call his supporters Nazis. And so you can imagine this is the context to which they're talking about it. Even Tim Walz was using this idea of these people are like Nazis. Harris went so far as to call Donald Trump a fascist. She even went and did a speech calling Donald Trump a fascist. And none of that stuff is working. One of the reports that came out in Axios was basically a Democratic group telling her, stop. It's not working. Nobody believes it. The message is not sinking in. And as I pointed out, part of the reason I don't think the message is sinking in is Donald Trump is a fixed quantity. Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He's been head of the Republican Party for something like 10 years. It is very hard to reshape someone when that person is already fully formed in the public spotlight. Donald Trump says weird shit all the time. So it's not like, oh my God, I can't believe Donald Trump said that. It is so baked into the cake of who Donald Trump is, it is almost just taken as a, it's taken without any weirdness associated with Donald Trump saying that stuff. So it's kind of hard to reform him or reshape him into something else when the public already sees him, for the most part, for what he is. Harris is different. Harris has only been in a race for a few months. She was invisible as a VP. And so a lot of the criticism for Harris is, tell us what you're going to do. Tell us what you want. Give me your theme of your presidency. Are you just taking power just because you're taking power? Or is there something else that you want? When the public and the criticism goes, especially in the polling, they don't know what she wants. There was a great article in the New Yorker, and there's this fantastic line where it says, they were talking about how they hung around with all of these fancy pants people. Many of these people were lobbyists. Many of these people giving tens of thousands of dollars to get Kamala Harris elected. And he said, despite all of the money being added, no one in clear terms knows what Kamala Harris actually wants. There's that. All right. So in the context of Hitler, fascists, Nazis, etc., Joe Biden comes out and says the following astonishing thing, that this is worse than Hillary Clinton deplorables, frankly. And Joe Biden has been trying to clean this up, but there's no really way to clean this up. You actually said it. Let's play the clip.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
These polls.
All right, one more time. One more time. I want to play it one more time. It is unconscionable. The only garbage I see out there are his supporters.
These polls that
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as.
The only garbage I see out there are his supporters. There's no way to walk that back. You did say it. It is what it is. Now, the Biden administration came out and said, well, I didn't mean that. What I meant was that the person who made the comment, the comedian, yeah, but you didn't say that. You said his supporters are trash, are basically garbage. I mean, imagine calling somebody trash, and not just calling an individual trash. Imagine calling 31% of the American public, 100 million Americans, trash. So Biden goes and changes it in the record set, meaning the AP is reporting that the Biden administration decided that he wanted to change what he said in the official reading of that statement, adding an apostrophe that was not there when he said it. Just astonishing. And then you get the New York Times who's saying Biden appears to say it. Oh, good. We have our guest. Let me bring our guest on, the one and only Angie Wong. Wait, Angie, give me 1 second. There we are. Angie, how you?
Good morning.
How you doing this morning, Angie?
I'm good. I am wired like everybody else. We are on this is the end zone, you guys, to a very, very long election season. I can feel the exhaustion from everybody.
Wait, Angie, before we get into it, let me bring you on. Let me give you a good read in so people will know who you are, just in case they don't know who you are. Angie Wong is a graduate of Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. After graduating, she has a successful career as a news editor, reporter, and columnist in the U.S. and Asia for publications such as South China Morning Post, Reuters, New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. She pivoted to politics and has worked on numerous political races at the local and federal level. And she co-hosted, at the very least she used to, Final Countdown on my old network, the one that they sanctioned out of existence, Radio Sputnik.
Yeah,
Angie,
we need to talk about this.
You doing all right this morning?
Jamal, we need to talk about this. We're in exile from basically, Russo U.S. networks. What is going on there? I hate this. I can't wait for the next administration to come in to clean up the FEC and all those who did this, to silence an entire network because they didn't agree with their message. What does that sound like to you? I mean, it is so weird to me. Like, I worked in Asia. I was the foreign correspondent for a number of years. That's what they used to do there. And I remember the first time I saw CNN blacked out on Chinese television. It was complete blackout for like 30 minutes because they did some report on some Tom Cruise movie that was, I guess, pro-American, or I don't even know
Yeah,
what it was. That's the kind of stuff that's going to start happening here. And that is
it's
what's
freaky,
frightening.
man. It is so bizarre. I don't know what is going on with liberals. I mean, this is not the way the liberals used to act. I mean, if you think about it, free speech, if you think of like a Noam Chomsky, freedom of speech is exactly for the speech you don't necessarily like. That is the entire point of the First Amendment, right? People, there are times where the government is going to act in a certain way that people would need to be able to say an uncomfortable truth or inconvenient truth that, yeah, the government may not necessarily like, but is necessary. And somewhere along the way, liberals have flipped on this. I mean, you get Kamala Harris, who's effectively saying she needs to do something to Twitter, meaning they need to inhibit or somehow police Twitter, meaning, I guess, ideally create some kind of body
Yeah.
to oversight of Twitter.
Mhm.
You get Tim Walz effectively saying freedom of speech is a problem. You get John Kerry saying freedom of speech is a problem. You get Hillary Clinton saying they need to lock people up or prosecute people for quote unquote misinformation. Mind you, the woman who went screaming about the Trump and the Russians is screaming about misinformation. Hillary Clinton is misinformation. Every time she opens her mouth, she's putting out stuff that's false. And yet, they want to put people in jail. The truth is, the honest to God truth is, you will never get a situation where any of these monitoring organizations that the government sets up to look for misinformation, none of those organizations will ever call anything that the government says as disinfo, despite the fact that it is often wrong and it is often put out specifically for disinformation reasons. Meaning, nobody came out and said, hey, we're going to prosecute people for putting out the Hunter Biden laptop as Russian disinformation. Nobody was ever going to say that. Nobody was ever going to say Trump and Russia, or for that matter, this notion that Trump was working with the Russians. There's never going to be political accountability for putting that nonsense out. Meaning, the government wants to be able to control what's true and what's not. And I think that is a horrible place for us to get to as a country.
Oh, we're there. We're
Yeah.
already there, you guys. I mean, you have to remember this entire election season and probably the ones prior, it is man versus the media, right? Donald Trump has been fighting the mass media. I used to belong to the mass media, right? And
Mhm.
I still pop on every once in a while, see what's going on, but you can already tell what's going on in the newsrooms,
Yeah.
right? These are not journalists in the newsrooms anymore. They're activists, and they're also activists in our networks. And that is what has been driving what information you and I have been receiving for how many decades. There's always a point where you realize journalism has gone, and it took us a long time to be able to say these things. I mean, I remember a time when when we did reports, you had to have 3 sources. You have to
Mhm.
use the word allegedly, and you can't just fluff and put punditry out there unless you're a pundit, right? Unless
Right.
you are, like Angie Wong, political pundit, right? You have to be, you're respected based on your reporting. Now, I get it. The only thing that I've ever really agreed with Obama about is that he says that Americans are living in 2 separate universes. We're in 2
Yes.
separate parallels, and we're receiving one thing here and one thing there, and it'll never meet in the middle. By the way, right? These are very, very divisive and meant to steer you to voting a certain way, your
Oh, right.
purchasing powers to be EV cars versus, oil and gas cars, all this stuff. It just doesn't merge. Now, I'm ready. I don't know about you guys, but I am ready for a unity candidate. I'm ready
Agreed.
for all those things after this election because it's been not only divisive, but it's been dangerous. And I
Yeah.
don't know how to repair that.
Well, they tried to murder Trump twice, if nothing
At
else.
least,
So
at least that we
dangerous.
know of.
Yeah. And then
Mhm.
again, that's another one, right? Democrats fully look, the argument that I made, and I've been pretty consistent on this. Donald Trump going out there screaming that the election was stolen. Yes, by definition, if a president is screaming to the megaphone, that 43 million people who listen, pay attention to him, may feel some kind of way. And you may have a percentage of people that, hey, show up at the Capitol. And hey, may be very pissed off that they believe that the election was stolen, especially if you believe what Donald Trump is saying. So, no, even though I don't necessarily believe Donald Trump told those people to raid the Capitol, they damn sure were there because of Trump. by the same token, because I believe that, I also believe, to be consistent, that all of this stuff about Trump is a fascist, Trump is Hitler, Trump is going to take over America, Trump is going to do this, and Trump is going to do that. If you full well believe that Donald Trump is Hitler, and let's say there's a percentage of Democrats out there that full well believe that, why wouldn't you take a shot at him? Why wouldn't you, try to save America by taking down Trump before he's able to take over America and make it into this fascist utopia? Meaning, it's their language that also creates a sense of threat that somebody who may not necessarily be wrapped all that tight believes it and tries to accommodate that threat. Give me a thought on that, because they try to act like, oh, we have nothing to do with this, despite the fact that we'll blame Trump for January 6th.
Oh, well, I'll take it one worse, right? You have generals saying this. You have
Yep.
people that were former Trump administration saying this. And that is all to set up what comes after the election, you guys. There's one thing if I'm going to say it or if a citizen's going to say it, right? And that's protected by free speech, but it's a whole other legal and constitutional meaning when you have former generals saying these things, right? People who have some weight as far as what happens in Act 2 of this. So we're in Act 1. We're in the election cycle. We're about to have Election Day on Tuesday, and people are going to go out and vote and do their civic duties. What happens between November 6th and January 20th? That is still a very big question. That's why these words do matter, because when you use words that incite violence, and when you use categories like Nazi, and you think to yourself, well, if, let's rewind 90 years back. If you knew Hitler was going to be Hitler, wouldn't you take him out before he took out, 6 million Jews, right? That's where we are today. I can't believe 100 years later, we're having these conversations. We're using these words, and those words like Hitler and whatnot, those aren't getting censored, right?
No,
it's people talking about, COVID and election integrity. Those guys are getting censored. So you see that people have eyes and ears and common sense, and they're like, no. And that's where we're seeing the red wave happening in cities now. In traditionally blue cities like where I am in Miami, Florida, you're seeing them go from deep blue to now pink. Right now, as we stand in early voting, we are R+5. That's Republican +5. It means that since Joe Biden ran in this very county in Miami-Dade, we have gained over 17 points as Republicans.
Wow.
Okay.
Really?
We're seeing similar trends in New York. I don't believe New York is going to flip out of blue. It is deep, deep blue, deepest blue. But you will see what I'm looking forward to seeing in the heat map is like little slivers of red and pink throughout New York City. And you're going to see that. You're not going to see it, on the island of Manhattan, but you will see it in a little bit in Chinatown, a little bit in the Bronx, a little bit here and there. And that's how we carve it out, you guys. And it'll take another cycle or two of running candidates, but we're going to carve that pinker and pinker and pinker until the whole thing bleeds red. That's, unless the Democrats have a better message, that's how we're doing it. And we're doing it.
Well, their message is Trump is Hitler, Trump is a fascist, his people are Nazis, his people are trash, meaning 100 million people are trash, according to Joe Biden. And then they try to clean it up. Here's the thing. They actually think that way, though. They believe that. And the reason, just so people know, politicians or campaigns tend to get more shrill when they find themselves under pressure. And when they think they're losing, they get very desperate. The rhetoric gets that much more hopped up. And for example, in the national polls, Angie, I think you can see this. So if you look, Trump up 0.3. Now, if you go back to about a month ago, Harris was up 2.
Right.
And then if you keep going, all right, Harris up 2.2. Then somewhere along the way from October 4th to today, she fell off of a cliff. Look at that drop. I mean, like literally just bloop.
What day is that? Do we have an exact timestamp
I
on
would
that?
imagine that the Harris
29th?
campaign has internal polling. They can see it for themselves.
Yeah.
And so the rhetoric gets more shrill. The rhetoric gets more hyperbolic as they try to come up with a justification for people to vote for him. Here's another one. If you're looking at state polls, because again, this is taking place in the battleground states. So again, Real Clear Politics, not having the ball. RCP, I think it's this one. Latest poll, yeah, I think it's this one. All right. When you go into the battleground states, now keep in mind, Pennsylvania, Democrats held Pennsylvania for like 50 years, where Republicans couldn't necessarily get it. Trump takes it, and then all of a sudden it teeter-totters and it becomes somewhat of a battleground state. It's understood that Harris needs Pennsylvania. If Harris loses Pennsylvania, most likely she would lose the race. So Mary's poll, Harris up 2 in Pennsylvania. Wisconsin, Mary's poll, Harris up 2. Michigan, Harris up 3 in Michigan. Okay, that's according to Mary's poll. That's one poll. Washington Post, Harris 47, Trump 46. This one is in Michigan. I don't know what the Atlas poll is, but they're going with a tie in Michigan. Here's another one, Michigan, Trump up 1. Here's another one in Pennsylvania, Trump up 1. Here's another one in Pennsylvania, Harris up 1. Here's another one in Wisconsin, tie. Another one in Wisconsin, tie. North Carolina, Trump up 2. North Carolina, Trump up 4. North Carolina, Harris up 1. Georgia, Trump up 5. That one is a bit of an outlier. There's Rasmussen. Rasmussen tends to go red. Georgia, Harris up 1. That's a CNN poll. I would imagine CNN hated that number. But you get the thread. And then Nevada, Trump up 4. In fact, in Arizona, one of the guys who was talking basically called it a rural tsunami and said that there was nothing good in those polls from the standpoint of the Democratic Party. So Shrill, yeah, I guess they have a reason to be. Andrew, from your point of view, why do you think she fell off the cliff like that? What do you think happened? Because there were no debates. There was no, and I've asked people who've come on the show, I'm super curious about other people's take on this. There have been no debates. There hasn't been, Harris didn't fall off stage. It wasn't anything crazy that basically had taken place. And yet you could see a precipitous drop around October 4th and a little bit of time before where it seemed like Trump was on an upswing and Harris was on the downslope. Why do you think that took place?
I think a few things, and it may have nothing to do with Harris whatsoever. I mean, it's not necessarily that she had a fall, although privately I'll tell you that. I mean, I think Harris and Waltz, they're like their own self-inflicted October surprise. Like they just didn't have the it factor, right? But what you saw was that Trump was getting more and more confident in his race, and the numbers were going in his favor, and the early voting registration and voter rolls were going towards Republicans in all the counties that he needed them to be. So what you saw was Trump being very, very relaxed and confident, and he was having fun now. He was just like, forget all this stuff, like forget them calling me all these names. I'm just going to have a great time. And that's what it was. So we know that he feeds off the energies at the rallies. Like he is Elvis at these rallies, right? So he feeds off that. And then on top of that, he's like, I'm going to troll her. I mean, he is the master troll, right? He goes to work at McDonald's on Harris's birthday, right? Totally takes the air out of anything that she could have, celebrated. I mean, that could have been a nice campaign for her. Hey, it's my birthday, vote for me. No, we're going to go. And like the world media jumped on Trump wearing an apron. Then, and then there were moments that were just given to Trump, even by, I think, dark MAGA Joe Biden, who called half of Americans garbage, right? And then it was trending on X, and Trump's people said, Mr. President, this garbage word is trending on X. We got to jump on this. So within 24 hours, there's the Trump dump truck that rolls in. And
speaking of that, let me show the audience, just so the audience can see what you're referring to. You're right. It was the Trump dump truck. Let's see. This. And this. I hope people can hear it.
I think the Democrats have done a very poor job. We're leading in every state. We're leading big, and I think that the comment made by really both of them, because there are really two of them, about being garbage, maybe 250 million people, they shouldn't be talking. That's like deplorable for Hillary. This is the deplorable for Hillary, and I think this is worse actually. For Joe Biden
basically,
to make that statement,
this is like the
really
deplorables to Hillary Clinton. I hope you guys can hear it. Angie, were you able to hear that? Okay, I just want
Absolutely. Look, as soon as
to make
that,
sure that you and the audience can hear it. They weren't able to hear some of the other clips,
I
but
was able to hear it. It
this
was
is like the
fine.
deplorables. Hillary, I would argue this is worse than deplorables. You're calling people trash.
No, why? Why is this worse than 2016 when Hillary called us deplorables? And then prior to that, we were called, what was the other one? Uh, there was, I mean, we're called all sorts of names. By now, we don't care. You know, we're not in high school, although I would compare the last 4 years of campaigning to high school. Exactly that. In fact, I think I'm going to be writing an op-ed about it soon because it feels that way. I mean, can you imagine, Jamal, when the history books comes out, okay, here the words that are going to be recorded for this election will be garbage and Hitler. I mean,
Yeah.
how farcical is this? We haven't grown up as a society, as Americans. We're using, you know, like these are things that I think maybe my own kids in middle school are throwing around because they're so immature. I
Yeah.
can't believe I have to defend people right now globally, and I'm doing a lot of international news these days because I think Americans have received this message, but globally we need to turn this message around. Trump is not the next Hitler, forget that. And we are not deplorable garbage ladies. I mean, I called myself one the other day. But what's really funny is I'm working the early voting polls, right?
Yeah.
Not as a poll worker, but as an observer. And I'm out there, you know, on the lines giving not giving palm cards. I'm not allowed to do that, but I'm out there like just seeing what's going on. And I saw so many people wearing sanitation vests, these safety vests, going to the polls to
Oh,
vote
did you?
yesterday in Miami. And I loved it. I was like, where do I get one? Because guess what? Those safety vests, they're all sold out at Lowe's. I haven't checked out Home Depot yet, but for the most part, people are like buying them up by the 50s.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, Frank Luntz points out that this is extremely damaging for Biden. I mean, and he points out that there's about 3% of people that are on the fence. I mean, even if you look at the poll from Harris in Real Clear Politics, the margins are very narrow. When you get into battleground states, you might be talking about like 20, 30,000 votes to make the difference in one state going to Harris, or for that matter, one state going to Trump. It's so close that Harris is running campaign ads against Jill Stein, which is mind blowing to me that you're running against a third party. But again, that gets across how low the margins are going to be between the two.
Yeah.
And so if the president comes out and trashes, this is kind of like Mitt Romney. 42% of Americans are useless eaters. They're just takers and money grubbers who, don't do anything. Okay, well, that's damaging to Mitt Romney. Obama was able to cast Mitt Romney and the Republican Party as these elitist, out-of-touch people that think most of the country or half of the country are moochers. Okay, well, same thing. And this, same difference, right? You get the Democratic Party and liberals effectively coming with this perception that the Republican Party and the people who back Trump are either Nazis, are either trash, are either deplorables. Like, this is the language that they're using. There's no way to clean that up because that's actually what they believe. And Joe Biden, maybe 20 years ago, might have had the capability of keeping that to himself and just use that in hushed tones in certain audiences with other Democrats. Well, he's not necessarily in his best form, and he came out. This kind of goes to why Kamala Harris was apparently giving him the stiff arm and didn't want him on the campaign trail. I suppose it's the stuff like that. And instead of her giving her big speech, instead of her being able to focus on Trump saying, well, they had that horrible rally where all of these people said these bad things about the American public and immigrants. Instead, you have to clean up Joe Biden calling these people trash. Just astonishing.
It actually helped us. Right now, it's lemons to lemonade, right? You
Yeah.
take a word like trash, which, by the way, originated at a Trump rally, right, in Madison Square Garden just on Sunday when
Yeah.
an
Comedian.
ill-tongued comedian came on and bashed Puerto Ricans using the word
Right.
garbage. Then Joe Biden flipped it. He thought he was spinning it in a funny way. No, he flipped it and gave it to Trump. Trump took it home. He closed that deal on that word garbage. So we own it. We love it. And yesterday, Mark Cuban threw another bone to the Trump world, which is, Trump surrounds himself with weak, unintelligent women, or like, I'm not quoting him properly because he's just not worth quoting. And it's like, oh, okay, so now I'm dumb and stupid and weak. All right. You just
Now,
lost the female
well, let's
vote
go,
there.
Angie. One thing I wanted to hit, because as we were pointing out before, we are apparently very dangerous, and we're so dangerous that they
Oh.
had to take us off the radio show.
Mm.
And apparently, we were saying subversive things that was infecting the American public on behalf of Russia. So I'm going to ask you: have any of your points of view changed since you're no longer on the network?
I never really understood the entire story of what happened there. I was hearing it third hand, second hand, and it was just it it didn't surprise me because as I mentioned before, I did work in Asia where things like that happens all the
Yeah,
time. It surprised me that it would happen on US soil
yeah,
by a US administration. That was like a real eye opener. Have
yeah,
I changed my tone? I actually became even more pro Russia since
yeah. After
then,
that,
only
yeah,
because what I found, and I actually don't have a lot of knowledge of Russia, and you knew that, and I think a lot of people in the network. I was just happy to be able to speak freely
right.
on any network.
Well, that's what they miss. That's fundamentally what they miss.
Yeah,
The people on the network trend left and right.
right.
And those people are just Americans with certain points of view. And they went with this idea that, well, because they're on the Russian network, we can marginalize them by basically saying everything that they're saying is purely because of the Russian government. This stuff is nonsense. The New York Times, and the reason why I'm bringing that up, the New York Times came out and identified conspiracy theories that were apparently being put on Truth Social. And I want to tell you some of these conspiracy theories that the New York Times is coming up with. Shout out to Glenn Greenwald for airing this. One of those, the US State Department has a permanent secret DC power faction, or has a deep state, which is a permanent secret power faction. Kamala Harris and the media hid Joe Biden's failing health. That was supposed to be a conspiracy theory.
Hmm.
The US blew up Nord Stream 2. That's supposed to be a conspiracy theory. Soros using his wealth to control Democrats. That is also supposed to be a conspiracy theory. What the New York Times realized, all of these things are true. Joe Biden came out and said, if Russia goes in, I'm going to end the pipeline. Russia went in, the pipeline gets blown up. And everybody in the US media is like, maybe Russia blew up its own pipeline. Just utterly ridiculous. Then for the Soros thing, they're acting as if 95% of the races are won by the side with the most cash, or 90% are won by the side with the most cash. Soros is a billionaire, and he gives his money to Democratic causes. So why do they think that that does not exhibit or provide a certain control, or at the very least influence into the politics every bit as much as anybody else who's given a lot of money? As for hiding Joe Biden's ailing health, I should even have to comment on that one. Give me your take on this stuff.
Well, I want to start off by finishing the last question, which is, I actually have to go to international press now to
Oh,
be
I'm sorry.
able to speak freely about
Yeah,
American politics. And
yeah,
I found that to be a massive shift in thinking. And that's why I really enjoyed going onto RT and onto Sputnik Network, because they allowed me to actually report as just basic reporting,
mhm,
sources, polls, of using like very old school journalism tools, right? It's not to say that I'm pro-Russian, but they made me come out with that label because
yeah,
what? Because I believe in free speech, because free speech may not exist anymore here in my own backyard and on US soil. So it doesn't surprise me that I think people are starting to really wake up to the idea that all of our kind of traditional Iron Lady media, like the New York Times, which I idolized growing up in New York. That was my hometown newspaper. I idolized that paper. I was a little girl wanting to work at that newspaper.
yeah.
Washington Post, the same thing. I mean, remember, Woodworth and what's his name?
Bernstein.
Yes, and it's
Yeah,
like that is now in the toilet as well. We see what's going on there, and I think Jeff Bezos sees it. He doesn't know what to do about it because his entire newsroom is run by radicals who protest every couple of days, and then then the newspaper doesn't get produced. So you're starting to see those things happen. Now, for the New York Times to say this is the truth and that's not the truth, Well, that's a really deep question. And I think that is where we have to do a little soul searching right after the election. And I would have loved to have had this happen before, but let's just say we have more bandwidth after this election, and we
Yeah,
should do some soul searching on what truth actually is,
yeah,
right? And who gets to report that. And I don't like big government, you know that, but I'm actually in favor now of licensing journalists, because what you're telling and feeding as far as information being put out there actually is harmful, like smoking a cigarette, like
oh,
a lot of things, because look what it leads to. If it leads to offline harm, you should be punished for that, right?
yeah, but you
You
realize Peter
knowingly
Ducey
know that
under
you're
a Biden
inciting
administration would
violence.
never get a license, or for that matter, somebody else under a Republican administration, they would never get a license. I am so not for that, because that's the same regulation as censorship. Like, that's still using the government apparatus in order to control what people think, and whatever the original intention of it. It would be like Twitter and the government telling people, "Hey, we'll pull your license if you act up. We'll pull your license if you say anything off the rails."
Well, yeah, and power gets abused that way, but there
Yeah.
has to be some sort of mechanism, right, beyond a defamation suit or something like that, where
Mhm.
you can hold people accountable for what they're putting out there. If it harms you personally, your family, your finances, your job, and people are just able to put it out there as news, just because you have like a fancy logo that you created on Canva, that's not news. That's not a real publication, but that's very easy to fake these days. So I
Yeah.
think we're at that point where, uh-oh, right? Like, we believe in free speech. We want to make sure that we preserve that, but there are abusers there. And you can't have it completely free, because right now, the way the laws are tilted, it's really kind of pro social media, pro technology, pro publishing, but at the same time, it hasn't caught up to the offline crimes that happen because of that. And
Yeah.
I think there's got to be some bridge or some understanding of how to protect online crimes. Look, these are, if you committed a crime offline, you get arrested. This exact same crime that is committed online, oh no, that's protected by free speech. That's the difference.
Yeah, but I would prefer, look, the remedy, it's not it's always a leaky bucket, right? And if we are concerned that the government is going to put pressure on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, if Twitter can put the New York Post in Twitter jail, do we really want the government to make the determination on who can say and who can't say? How do you even regulate that? So if I'm unregistered as a journalist and I go on Twitter to write a post, how do you, I don't know the mechanism for that. And considering the way the government was functioning with basically going behind the scenes in order to do an end run around the First Amendment, I do not in any circumstances trust a governmental apparatus to make the determination what's true and false. And I strongly suspect that that is exactly what will happen. I mean, do you really want Hillary Clinton determining who gets a journalistic license?
I wonder how doctors get licenses. How do
Mm.
lawyers get licenses? Do they have a political affiliation and that all of a sudden allows them to be licensed? No, I think there's a process, right? And again, of course, all of it will get politicized because you're feeding information, and
Yeah, of
that is
course.
what drives people to vote or drives people to buy your product. I get that. But look, if you cross the line and you put out something and you don't have a single source for it, and that creates chaos and maybe market chaos, you got to think about the ramifications of that. Not every single person with a means to a microphone is right in the mind.
Yeah, of
And
course.
that, I think that's where I'm talking about. There's right now, it is too free fall, and that's why we're so divided in our thinking. There are people that I talk to even today, voters. They they really do believe that Trump is the next Hitler. And it's
Yeah,
not, and you know why?
they do.
They heard it 7 times said to them in different ways.
Yeah,
This is the trick of marketing, right? I do campaigns. I market nobodies and then I make them somebodies, right? The idea is that you get that name and face ID and brand in front of someone 7 times. And if you can do that, there it's in the psyche and you remember it. So that is what's happening on the other side. Trump has been branded Orange Man bad, rapist, racist. Now he's Hitler because they heard it 7 times. And I see a lot of that, especially in the international news, where not, he's an insurrectionist and he's Hitler. And these are like pretty well respected journalists who are saying it, but they can refer back to, oh well, your network at CBS said it and MSNBC said it, so these are credible sources.
Well, I would say that, yeah, I mean, they have gotten more shrill in their appropriation, especially the closer we get to the election. Angie, always appreciate you, Angie. Angie Wong, thank you for joining me this morning. Angie Wong is a graduate of Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. After graduating, she had a successful career as a news editor, reporter, and columnist in the U.S. and Asia for publications such as South China Morning Post, Reuters, New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. She pivoted to politics and has worked on numerous political races at the local and federal level. She was co-host on the final countdown. Angie, thank you for this.
I
appreciate
miss you guys. Thanks so much.
All right. So we have gotten, we're in the 9 o'clock hour. Shout out to Angie Wong. Much appreciation that she joined me for this morning. Like I said, we had a full show. Oh, shout out to Angie Wong. Shout out to Angie Wong. Like I said, we had a full show. She has my deepest appreciation for joining me. I disagree with the licensing thing. I think I'm a little weirded out by that one. But all things being equal, people can have their points of view, right? And that's the entire point of media. It freaks me out, the behavior of Democrats on this stuff. This is not the way liberals used to behave. I mean, keep in mind, liberals were the ones that were free speech. These were the women with arm hair that didn't want to shave their legs because it's their statement. It's my body. I get to make that statement. These were the Noam Chomskys of the world. Free speech is specifically for the speech you don't particularly like. That's the reason why we have a First Amendment in the first place. These were the guys that it's different. Somewhere along the way, they've gotten to this mindset of, well, if it contradicts our narrative, then it's too far. And so we have become somewhat insecure. And in that insecurity has started to take more provocative actions in order to corral speech. And so, yeah, we're going to do it and run around the First Amendment in order to go after Facebook and Twitter, or for that matter, to go after TikTok, or for that matter, to go after Sputnik or RT. If you are right, what is your issue? Typically, speech is an argument. But in this case, they've gotten to the point of saying, we don't even want to argue. And I suspect the reality of it is, because the line have gotten so voluminous, that it is far easier to just try to get rid of what the other person is saying, or get rid of the other person in general, as opposed to have to deal with the actual argument, especially since the argument is often false. The US government lies constantly. Russia blew up its own pipeline. No, it didn't. Unprovoked war in Ukraine. No, it wasn't. It was totally provoked. It all started on October 7th. No, it didn't. It definitely predated October 7th. One lie after the next, after the next, after the next, in the way that they basically propagate reality. The moment that you point out you're lying, then they want to say it's misinformation. Like I said, propaganda and this notion of being a Russian bot or a Russian propagandist or an Iranian propagandist or whatever other propagandists just boil down oftentimes to inconvenient truths that they're basically stuck with. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to bring my guest back on, Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin is going to join me at what time is it? At about 9:15. I'll be back in a moment. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Let's see. He has declared his mic off, and this will sound like it was out of our speakers. It doesn't sound like it's out of your speakers. What is it supposed to sound like? I'll check it after the fact and make sure there's no weirdness associated with it. But I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. We have had a full and packed show this morning. Peter Coffin is going to be joining me shortly. I want to thank all of you for joining me. We have had up to 222 people today. I think it was like 90 something on Twitter, another 128 on YouTube. So we are growing. Well, I was afraid we're going to hear something gross. No, you're not going to hear anything gross. I've gotten much better with the sound system, so I'm becoming more proficient at it. But look, I want to thank all of you for joining me. As I said, my name is Jamal Thomas. The Jamal Thomas Morning Show goes from 7 to 10, Monday through Friday. Not to mention, I pop in at all times of the day. You may even find me at 3 in the morning. That's just the way I roll. I want to thank all of you for joining me on this show. If you dig the content, like it, share it, make sure you subscribe. Definitely hit the notification bell so you will get notifications. Definitely subscribe. I'm trying to grow. The objective is 40,000 by Christmas. We are at about 30,000 some change right now. So definitely hit us. Let's keep it going. My job is to be consistent, to give you news, politics, culture on international and domestic stage, and to bring on subject matter experts that can have that conversation. So if you like it, hit the like, share it far and wide to any and everybody who you think might be interested in it. Share it on Twitter, share it on YouTube, share it everywhere. I don't know if you can share it on YouTube, but you get my point. If you really dig the content, feel free, or if you're so inclined, you can support the content through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. Any chat from a Super Chat will be read, providing it is not racist, sexist, bigoted, or anything like that. Even if you take the piss out of me, I will most likely read it. It helps the content, and it helps keep this content going. And as I pointed out, even $1 helps. I know it doesn't sound like it, but even $1 helps. One of the interesting things that is a new phenomena that I am completely unaware of in the prior era is this idea of promotional videos, not just for regular stuff. Like, meaning, it's one thing to have a promo for a movie. It's one thing to have a promo for a product that you're coming out with. Hell, even for a channel. I am promoting this channel that comes on from 7 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. That's one thing. But for war, it's weird. If you remember during the Ukraine-Russia conflict, when Ukraine was doing the ballyhooed offensive, and they kept saying, we're going to do an offensive, we're going to do an offensive. That offensive is coming. That offensive is going to be powerful. We're going to take it all back. We're going to take it all back. We're going to have an offensive. And if I remember correctly, they were doing like campaign videos about the offensive that they were going to launch. Now, you can right off the bat see the problem with this, right? If I continuously tell you I'm going to do an offensive, I'm going to do an offensive, what are you going to do? I'm going to build my defensive in lieu of that defensive, or I'm going to preempt you before you can do the offensive, meaning you are telling your enemy precisely what you're planning on doing and giving your enemy preparation to prepare for that offensive. Now, it's one thing if there was another reason for it, like you were trying to, I don't know, get something across an enemy, like a nuclear missile test is somewhat of a promotion. It's basically saying, don't F with us. And we have the capacity to go all in, and we will go all in if the integrity of the state is threatened. So there's that. When the U.S. spends $1 trillion a year on military, well, again, that is also kind of a promo. Look how much money we're spending on a military. It's almost like having a military parade in the context of a newspaper headline. Iran has just gotten hit by Israel. Now, by all accounts, that hit was far more insignificant than what Israel wanted. The reporting on it is that Israel had planned on several waves of attacks, but were met with air defense that they downplayed, meaning they underestimated Iran's military capabilities in the line of air defense. Now, whether Iran got an upgrade or not, who knows? I suspect on some level they did. But the reality of it is they were not able to inflict damage in the way that they wanted to inflict damage. But if you remember, Iran said, if you attack us, we will respond overwhelmingly. So despite the fact that Iran is basically saying, look, this barely touched us. There were certain areas that it hit. There were 4 people that were killed. But all things being equal, this did not have the bang for the buck in the way that they were saying it was going to have the bang for the buck. And so Iran is, have their chest poked out. Israel, who usually is going to brag about the degree and the extent of the attack, has been somewhat muted in talking about their attack. Now, the U.S. government has basically put out warnings saying we will back Israel to the hilt, despite the fact that Netanyahu is a maniac and he's going into all these countries murdering people. But the reason why I bring up the campaign ad thing, Iran has released an ad. And I want to play this ad before I go to Peter. If Peter can hear me, I'll be with you in a moment, Peter. This is the campaign video. And I'm saying campaign video. It's not a campaign video, but it's the ad that Iran released about True Promise 3. And this is supposed to be the attack potentially on Israel. I'm fascinated by this just because I've never seen this. This is a modern phenomena. If there is a modern phenomenon at all, we're in the TikTok age. I have no idea what those words say, but that is super weird. We are in a different era, man. We are in a different era. I swear, we're in a different era. Like, part of me thinks that the world is trying to birth a new normal. And what I mean by that is that the moment that you add technology and you add communication technology, especially, and you're able to wed the world together, and you're able to wed the world together in a way where I know what is going on in somebody else's country and they know what's going on in my country. And I can have a certain point of view of something that's happening elsewhere, and they can have a point of view of what's happening here. That is a different reality. That is a different norm. And because it's a different reality and a different norm, on some level, it weds the world together in a way that was almost impossible prior. The moment that something happens on any particular part of the world, there's a video camera somewhere, the person can see it. If there's an atrocity happen, there's a video camera, you can see it. When the Native Americans were being wiped out in the United States, there was no video camera. There was no thing where a person can watch. In the colonial situations, either in Africa or South America, again, there was no video camera. There wasn't a situation where people can watch. These days, as Israel goes about its atrocities, people can watch. You can see the cameras. You can see the explosions. You can see the kids that are in cages or the kids that are in the rubble. You can see the bodies that are being burned alive. That is a visual that you can see. In the old days, let's say in the Vietnam War, where they would have war correspondents, the war correspondents could go with the individual and they could see it and they can dictate the war, but they're only seeing at that point what the military is allowing them to see. That's not the way it happens now. All things being equal, anybody with a video camera can pull out the camera and watch. And the cameras at this point are ubiquitous. It is fascinating. I get the sense that this is a positive. I think, and I would even go so far as to say this may be why realism has become the norm in our television. If you think back to shows like Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, these shows at the time did not reflect how people actually behaved in real world terms. It was this kind of sanitized view of reality in a way that just doesn't exist today. It wouldn't even make sense if it was there today. Somewhere along the way, realism became steeped in our cinema and our movies. So the TV shows for the day shows a modern family. You would see the certain problems that families have. Those things will be elucidated far more than they were in the past. I suspect part of that is people have gotten far more, I guess, familiar with what it means to be a person. And as social media and people show their lives in so many ways. I mean, you can put pretty much anything in YouTube and Google, and you would get a picture, a video of somebody doing it. It is bizarre. It's strange. By the same token, there's a certain quality to that I like. James Baldwin one time pointed out when he was talking to somebody, and he was reading, I think he was talking about Dostoevsky. I can't pronounce the name, but it's the Russian writer. And he was pointing out how, as he was reading through the book, he realized, so other people feel blue. Other people can be embarrassed about certain things. Other people can have these insecurities. These things are just part and parcel of being a person and being a human being. I would say, if nothing else, part of the benefit of social media, or part of the benefit of this web of us and the way that we engage and interact with ourselves, people in far more ways can be seen for what they actually are, as opposed to this notion of what they envision themselves to be. And I'm saying the level of honesty in regards to this is what the human experience is like is on some level, even though it's depraved on some level, even though sometimes it's humiliating, even though sometimes it's sad, at the very least, it's honest. I don't know, it's a weird reality that we're being birthed into. But I would say it's wedding us together in a far larger sense as a world. And maybe that's a positive thing. Maybe this idea of a multipolar world, maybe this thing of these countries being wed together where we're seeing each other as equals, where this idea of the hegemon becomes a thing of the past. Maybe that's a good thing in all earnest. My fear is that getting to that point is treacherous. And of course, from the United States point of view, if we're not the hegemon, then somebody else is going to take that mantle. So from our point of view, it is better us stay it, and we're going to do any and everything in our power to maintain that hegemon status. Now, I think the problem with that argument is similar to the argument with the Soviet Union, meaning if the United States makes this political point of view of I'm freedom, I'm justice, I'm love and light, Superman is the epitome of the US with red and blue and all of this other stuff. But if you remember at some point with art reflecting real life, in Injustice comics, Superman went insane. And Superman starts to become policeman of the world and becomes a villain in those comic books. I'm saying in a very similar sense, the US has somewhat gone insane in the way that we've gone about our policies with this kind of self-righteous, we set the rules, etc. I don't think the world is going to be okay with that. And I strongly point out that the reason why BRICS exists, why the dollar is using its currency status, where it went from 70-something% to 50-something%, and they're making exerted effort to come up with a payment system that goes around the dollar. They're doing these things because of the way that we function in the world with this notion that we are hegemon, the West and these other countries in the West are basically our vassals, and we can somehow dictate how we engage with the rest of the world. If I'm exceptional, then what the hell are you? Or if I am indispensable, then what the hell are you? Meaning the language gets across how we view other people and other countries. And if I am telling you that I'm dispensable, I'm the greatest thing on earth, I'm the best thing in the world since sliced bread, you're not going to tolerate that. You would tolerate that for a person, let alone a country. And when you get a large number of countries coming together saying, we want a new world, we want a new norm, I suspect that's the world that we're being birthed into. The question becomes whether or not that world is birthed into in chaos and fire, or whether it's somehow reached without the worst taking place. We will see. My hopes is that there will not be a catastrophe in trying to reach this new world. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'll be back in a moment. There we are. There we are. We are back. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I see Peter Coffin. He is here. Peter, I screwed up. I did not send you the thing early enough, but I'm going to bring you in. Before I bring you in, I just want to give the beginning of it all. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys enjoy me. This runs from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. News, politics, culture, international, domestic politics. If you guys enjoy conversations, then this is the show for you. Share it far and wide. Make sure you hit the subscription button. Make sure you hit the like button. And if you enjoy the content, please feel free to give the PayPal, Super Chat, Patreon, etc., etc., etc. All chats will be read. That is my spiel. The guest I'm bringing to you is Peter Coffin. He's a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In their book, Custom Reality and You, they explore reality where profit is the driving force. Peter, my man, welcome to the show. How you doing this morning, man?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good.
Dressed quite snappy.
Wait, one second. There we are. I'm doing good. Apologies. I thought I sent all of the links at the same time, and I realized I had your number pulled up, and I never actually hit the send button.
It's
my
no
fault.
problem.
I deeply
contact you over
apologize.
Skype,
Thank you
which
for
is
coming
also-
on, despite my screw up.
No problem. No problem. I tried to contact you on Skype, but I think that was stupid too. That was probably my fault.
Well, no, you're fine. It's like when you're in the middle of the live stream, and I'm doing it all on my own, and so there's no, like in the old days, I'd have a producer that would whisper in my ear,
Yeah.
"Hey, somebody's trying to do something." This time around, it's more difficult. But thank you. How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm good. You dressed quite snappy this morning.
I am. The first week that I started the show, I came in a suit because my thought was, I'm going to have a suit for my first week of starting the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. And somewhere along the way, I end up liking it.
Yeah.
I feel
No, I
more,
like dressing nice too.
I don't know. I
It
feel like
feels
I'm
good.
doing something important when I'm wearing a suit, even though
It
I'm
feels
not doing
good.
anything important. I'm out of a job. But nevertheless, yes, I'll go with the snappy outfit. What do you think? How do you, let's start at a roundabout part. Let's start more broadly. What do you think about the tenor of this election? And just so to start the conversation off, because I don't think I've spoken to you about this. So I'm going to share the screen just so everybody can see what I'm referring to right here. This is the context of the election currently up to this point. In the presidential election, if you're talking about, this is state polling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Marist poll has Harris in the lead in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, but they're a little bit of an outlier. So when you go to Michigan, MSN, Mitchell Research, Trump up 1. Pennsylvania, I don't know what Atlas is, but Trump up 1 in that one. Pennsylvania, even in UMass poll. Another Atlas poll, even. Another poll for Wisconsin, tie. North Carolina poll, Trump up 2. North Carolina poll, Trump up 4. North Carolina poll, CNN, Harris up 1. Georgia, Rasmussen +5. Rasmussen to the trend Republicans, so take it with a grain of salt. Georgia, another one, CNN, Trump up 1. Arizona, Trump up 4. And there was another poll that apparently came out in Nevada. Was it Nevada or Arizona? It was one of those. And they were pointing out that it looked like a rural tsunami and that there was nothing good in that polling for Democrats, despite the fact that they thought they'd be able to get their hands on Arizona. And again, if you look at the national poll, just one more time before I let you in, Peter, this one. In the national polling, typically it's believed that Democrats need to be up 5 in order to win the national poll. Okay, well, not up 5. Harris is down.
Yeah.
Trump up 0.3. But the thing I want to put out, look at this. At her height, she was at 2.1 above Trump in the national poll.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see up and down, but then you see a precipitous drop, like she fell off of a cliff, where Trump takes the lead. My question is why? From your point of view, what the hell happened to Harris's campaign, and why did she fall off a cliff?
Well, this is going to sound really stupid, but McDonald's happened.
Oh,
I
you
think those types of stunts are really hurting her and helping him. I think the
Oh.
garbage truck yesterday, it was a very good stunt. Like I saw the garbage truck stuff. I was like, why is he with a garbage truck? Oh my God, why he's in with the garbage truck? You know,
he
like
even said he gave a press conference from that garbage truck saying, I bought this truck for Harris and Joe Biden. And again, this was because of the trash comment.
Yeah,
Now they're trying to clean it
supporters.
up, saying, no, he just meant the specific comedian. No, as I've shown before, it was clear as, in fact, let me show the clip. I'm gonna show it one more time, just so the audience can see it for themselves. There is no mistaking this. Joe Biden clearly pointed out that they were, that his supporters were trash. Let's see if I can get it up.
I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization.
Just said it.
And it's un-American.
The demonization is un-American. The only trash I see floating out there are his supporters.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? Like, Trump wouldn't say that about the Democratic voters. Like, that's really intense. You know, it's not something that the president should say for sure, and that's exactly what he currently is. He's the guy in charge. It's amazing. And the thing is, it's such a polarizing comment. And the comeback of doing a press conference from a garbage truck, it's unimaginably savvy. Like, nobody, like, whoever came up with that in his organization deserves the biggest promotion possible. Like, but I think these stunts, you know, all the Democrats who are the pundit, you know, cadre is all complaining about how, you know, these are fake stunts. They're just PR things. They're staged. They're what it's like. I don't know if you realize this, but we all know that every single political event that's of this nature is like it's staged to some extent. First off, you can't have Trump just walk into a McDonald's. Like he's had 2 attempts on his life. That for safety reasons, they have to be at least partially staged. But like for advertising and wanting things to turn out well, we know that there is some degree of curation in any political stunt like this. Like everybody knows that. But Trump is doing things that specifically say you, the normal person, the worker, the class that is keeping society running, you are part of my calculations. And that is just something that the other side refuses to do. And I think that the contrast drawn by these stunts is just kind of crystallizing that in people. And I think the stunts are also very visible. It's stuff that they put everywhere. The garbage truck, the McDonald's one. Trump was basically doing stand-up about wearing the orange vest at his thing. I don't know. Did you see that clip of him saying, like, they told me that I looked thin in it, and I said, okay, I'll wear it. And it's just like,
I didn't see him doing stand-up. I watched the press conference, though, because the press conference blew my mind. He pulled up the garbage truck, and I thought to myself, he is literally doing a press conference in a garbage truck. And then there's a part in the press conference where nobody asks him about the truck. Like, nobody says, hey, sir, why are you in the truck? And so he brings up, do you like my truck?
Well, they knew.
Do you like my garbage truck? This is in honor of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And if you notice, he is doing his best to tie Kamala Harris to Joe Biden and those comments, basically saying they think all of you are trash. They think all of you are Nazis. I guess the true point, though, that they may not necessarily want to deal with is that Democrats or liberals actually think this way. And I have this clip of Whoopi Goldberg. Where Whoopi Goldberg, they bring up deplorables, and Whoopi Goldberg was like, they are deplorable. This was like just a few days ago.
They are deplorables.
Yeah.
Like comes in. No, it is very much like that. Like the problem is you can talk to I don't want to say an average Democratic voter, because I know a lot of Democrats that are completely normal people. But if you talk to somebody who's just a little bit immersed in it, it's these people are literally evil. How could you ever vote for that Nazi? That makes you a Nazi. All these people are they're scum under Trump's boot. It's just literally, it's horrifying, honestly. And I'll say this, like, it's unrelated. I went out with my kids yesterday for trick-or-treating and had the first normal one of these since 2020, since COVID. And it just was so bizarre because I was out having like a normal community event. Nobody's talking politics. Nobody's doing any of that. And it made me think of politics the whole time because I'm just like, this is so abnormal. Everywhere you look, everybody's just screaming at each other over this. It was really nice. I'll say that. But like, it really sort of crystallized how insane this whole thing is right now. It's just like the polls, like you brought up, they're showing Trump basically ahead. The Real Clear Politics average has him ahead. I think the polls are maybe even, I don't really trust polling. I haven't since 2016. But I do trust people putting money on it. And all of these gambling sites that allow you to bet on the elections, they have Trump ridiculously far ahead because that's something you're literally putting your money where your mouth is. People are risking money for a reward based on being right who wins. Like, you don't have to want Trump to win to bet for Trump in that instance. So it's to me, those are even more indicative. I really think that minus something insane happening, I don't see how he can't win at this point. I don't
trust polls. I trust momentum.
Yes.
So like when the polls seem to be going in a particular direction, that I do trust. Like when it's like, I always say, I don't know what the number is specifically, meaning I can't necessarily, plug it. But when you see this kind of trend going in a particular direction, that I do trust. Also, the campaigns are acting differently. Like, the Harris campaign seemed to be getting across or signaling, intentional or not, that they're behind. I mean, the idea that you're calling somebody Hitler, what happened to Joy? Where's Joy? Well, Joy went away to Hitler and fascists and all of this other stuff. You say that stuff when you think that you are like a drowning man, whereas Trump seems to be relaxed, confident, etc. He's going on Joe Rogan. He's going on Tucker Carlson. J.D. Vance went on Joe Rogan. Let me ask you this. Do you think Harris should have went on Rogan? Because I think she should have. I think
absolutely
Rogan, being the everyman, has this humanizing way of talking to people in this kind of very sitting across a bar way, if that makes sense.
Yes.
That might have actually did good for Harris, who often so scripted. She looks so robotic. She's too practiced in regards to being rigid in a way where she comes across as inauthentic. It's possible that the interview would have humanized her in a way that oftentimes her campaign events don't necessarily do so. Do you think she should have went on Rogan? Do you think she would have gotten some level of bang for the buck for doing so?
I absolutely think she should have, because Joe Rogan, like they talk about Joe Rogan as like doing propaganda for Trump, but that's literally just because he had Trump on. I watched the whole thing. He pressed Trump for quite a while on the first question because Trump never answered it. And he kept trying to get Trump to answer. He didn't. It's not like he did it disrespectfully or anything, but like that's the kind of interviewer he is. He wants to ask a question and get an answer and bounce things back and forth. Like it's a conversation as opposed to a more, what you were talking about, Kamala, which is that she's generally quite scripted and participates in generally quite scripted sounding events. With Joe Rogan, he also, like in his talking about wanting to have her on, has been very, very respectful. Like he said, like, I just want to have a conversation with her. I want to talk to her like a human being. I'll treat her nicely. I have no intention of being like mean or anything. Like he's not like out to get her or anything. The only reason he said that she wasn't on is because they wouldn't travel to Austin to do it, and they wouldn't do more than an hour. And I saw all these people like, how dare he make that kind of demand? It's like, what do you think Joe Rogan's podcast is? It is by far, not even by a close margin, by far the largest podcast on earth.
Yes.
There isn't one bigger than that. There is absolutely no reason not to spend whatever money on whatever private jet to get Kamala in that studio for at least 2 hours. There's no reason. Like and the thing is he doesn't make people look bad that are on there. He doesn't do it.
No.
Like he has people on that he disagrees with, and he is as kind to them as he can possibly be. He just wants to hear them talk, wants to entertain their thoughts. Like he pushes back sometimes, but it's never in a mean way. A lot, if anything, like the criticism I would give him is that he doesn't criticize anyone. He's just kind of there to talk to people, and that's both good and bad. It's a double-edged sword. But I think Kamala really messed up not going on because, again, he doesn't really criticize anybody other than like maybe to be funny sometimes.
Yeah. And by the way, that's the demographic she needs. Meaning
Exactly.
the very demographic that she's having most difficulty with is that demographic.
Yes.
And you've allowed Donald Trump a platform unopposed in that space. You've allowed Vance unopposed in that space. I mean, there are situations where Rogan, as you said, should push back. I mean, what was that actor name that said 1 × 1 is 2? And he
Terrence
goes on this
Howard.
huge rant
Terrence,
that pisses
yeah,
off the
Terrence
scientific
Howard.
community because he's basically has this book of stuff that's just utter nonsense. And Rogan basically let it slide. I guess my point is, if your objective is to reach a voting bloc that you, under normal circumstances, is very skeptical of you, Rogan is the show to do it. You sit down, you have a conversation with the guy and see where it goes. That's my point of view.
Well, you have the craziest reach, and you have a guy who's literally going to entertain what you're saying as though it's real, no matter what. Essentially,
exactly.
Like people, he's gotten the accusation in the past that whatever the last person he's talked to is his belief system, and it's like that's not entirely untrue, but it's really just that he's not really a mean. Like he doesn't really even interview people; he just has conversations with people.
Yeah,
and. Why wouldn't you want that? Why would you? It's such an elitist and bizarre position to be like, I don't need Joe Rogan. Like, yes, you do need Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
You are not beating Donald Trump, who like, if you actually had serious policy discussions with, he can't nail down any policy in a live setting. He can't do that. How are you losing to that? Think about it. Like, it's just an insane idea that like you don't go onto this show that you're going to look good on for the most part, and it reaches. I mean, that Trump one, while being algorithm restricted, has gotten nearly 40 million views at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
And that it's algorithm restricted. If you search for it, you will get clips of it and reactions to it. You won't get the episode. And yet people are going to Joe Rogan's channel on YouTube and watching it because it's that, it's that compelling. It's insane to hear Trump in that setting. It's a very different, like I've watched a lot of Trump, the podcast Trump has gone on, and he's somewhat relaxed, but obviously he's expecting an interview. Usually the podcaster has a set amount of questions. Joe Rogan clearly walked in there with like one question he wanted to ask him. And that was the first question.
Yeah. It puts you in the mind of, what is the guy? It's not Blitzer. It's the old guy in the suspenders. Do you know who I'm talking about? He used to be on CNN.
I do, but I don't remember his name.
I can't think of his name. I think he died recently.
Larry King.
I remember one time I asked him, what is his interview technique? And he said, I just want to talk to the people. He said, it's not like I have this kind of pre-planned stuff. He said, I go in and just have a conversation. And that is the way I go about it. Rogan is kind of like that. He has this very down-to-earth way of just asking basic questions that the media wouldn't, under normal circumstance, and ask.
Yes.
Which can be a little not deceptive, but it can sneak up on you in regards to what he's trying to get at or what he's trying to get you to give. I don't know. He's a fascinating interviewer, and I think she lost something.
Yeah.
Question: why do you think? How did it happen that a blue-collar billionaire, meaning a literal billionaire, that is getting paid $75 million by Elon Musk, that is getting $100 million from Miriam Adelson, that is openly said, I'm going to cut your taxes, all of this stuff. How does that guy who came down a golden escalator take the mantle that he is the fighter for the working class and that he is the blue-collar billionaire, and Democrats end up being put in the position of being elitists? How the hell does that happen?
Well, I think, for one, it's that the Democrats, are elitists, for one. I think that,
there's that.
If it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it's a duck, for one. But I also think it's a strategic error that they have made in that they have attempted to portray him as a complete, aberration to everything that the United States. He's really not. He's not. My criticism for Donald Trump is that he's not really that different from Barack Obama, who was not really that different from George W. Bush, who was not really that different from Bill Clinton, et cetera, et cetera. That's my criticism for Donald Trump. And in portraying him as though he is the total opposite of them and acting elitist, which is what they do, they're telling the public that he's not elitist. Like they're the opposite of them. So what's the opposite of an elitist? A populist. So whether or not he is actually a populist is ultimately irrelevant. The messaging that they have put forward has been endlessly that of it's he's a populist. He's like they've even tried to characterize the word populist as like synonymous with fascist, which you're not going to be able to do, because if people think about populism, they think about they think a lot about how the word actually, like what the definition of the word is, how people generally use it. They think about the fact that Bernie Sanders was called a populist in the national stage, so it can't be fascist, etc. Stuff like that. Like, and all of these attempts to brand Trump a very specific way, they backfire because they're not considering what they're putting forward as themselves by themselves. Forget Trump. What are they portraying? And if they're saying Trump is the opposite of what they're portraying, is what they're portraying coming off badly? If that's the case, then he's coming off good by default in all of their messaging.
Yeah. Also, yeah, I agree with that. That basically by saying he's not one of us, he is something different. He is not part of this political dynasty. He's not like the Washington thing, despite the fact that the man was president for 4 years. And he has been leader of the Republican Party for all of this time. And I agree with you on that. It's almost like by ostracizing him, they're creating this dynamic that a public that feels already somewhat separate and disenchanted by Washington, because there's this widespread belief that the country is going in the wrong direction, or there's this belief that they don't care about us. Then the guy who is against that, the guy who they don't seem to like, that seems to be an irritant for it, they're more inclined to say, I want to throw a monkey wrench into the way the system works. Now, you have some people who just love the guy in general. Yeah. But you have some people who just want to throw a monkey wrench into the system. They hate him. They don't like him. He's different. He's populist. He's something else. That guy's getting my vote. And God, I agree with you on this. I've asked so many people this, like, how the hell does the Democratic Party lose that mantle? Especially, this was supposed to be the party of unions. This was the party, especially going back to like the 80s, where you had union workers, where unions were supposed to dominate the Democratic Party. It's supposed to be the release valve to the capitalistic system, meaning, yes, you have a capitalistic country and you have two political parties. One party represents the 1%. That's supposed to be the Republican Party. The other party represents the poor, the working class, etc. That's supposed to be the Democratic Party. And somewhere along the way, that flips. And I think Thomas Frank gives a really good breakdown.
Horseshoe theory is right, but not how you think.
Now, go into that, Peter. Explain that.
So this is my latest documentary, and I put these out as booklets as well. But it's my latest documentary. You can go to it on youtube.com/@importantds, as in documentaries, and also there's a D's nuts joke kind of by implication. But the idea is that I don't see the left and right as fundamentally different things. I see them as different ideologies that ultimately sort of perpetuate the same thing. Like they're rooted in the left. The whole left-right paradigm comes from the French Revolution, where the people who were for the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, were the left. They congregated on the left of the National Assembly, and the supporters of the aristocracy, the right, congregate on the right side. And that is a class divide. That's a specific class divide. And when the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, won against the aristocracy, they absorbed it. The aristocracy didn't just dissolve. It moved into a new mode of ownership and production. And ultimately, I think the divide now is not two different classes, which is a material conflict. It's more of an ideological conflict. And it's old money versus new money. That's really what it is. And new money likes to consider itself progressive and different than all those old stiffs. And that's really what the actual conflict is in our country. It has nothing to do with capitalism or power or anything. It's just two different ethos that are conflicting with how we run capitalism.
See, I think a socialist would disagree with that. Like a Richard Wolff, for example, he may say, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just playing devil's advocate on this. They would argue that means of production is inherently the crux of the issue, meaning who does the labor, who does the work, who keeps the resources from that labor and from that work. And as a context of that, who can put money into the political space for X or for Y in order to propagate policy in a particular way that either advantages one class over another class. Or do you disagree with that?
I don't entirely disagree with it, but I think that it doesn't quite get there. Like the contradiction that defines capitalism is the socialization of production versus the private appropriation of the product and therefore the profit.
Right.
And unless you are challenging that, you are not presenting a material political viewpoint or program that contradicts capitalism. And thus, if you are the left and your program is not addressing that specific thing, that defining contradiction, at least as a Marxist, this is where I'm coming from. I'm sure that there are people who would disagree with this, and I'm not going to try to act like that doesn't exist. But unless you are attempting to materially resolve that contradiction, you're not attacking the system, you're supporting the system.
Right.
Like there is reformism that is specifically designed at that. Like if you are at, like, yes, we want to use reform to change the relationship of production so that the socialization is taken care of and accounted for in the appropriation of the product and profit. If that is what you're doing in your reformism, that's technically revolutionary. But if you're not doing that, then what you're essentially doing is creating ways that, and like you said, a release valve for capitalism more so than a fundamental change in capitalism. I don't hate capitalism by any means. There are a lot of, this is also a thing that a lot of socialists will disagree with me on. I don't have that sort of, oh man, we got to smash the system and reset everything. No, I kind of like the idea of where we're at technologically. And then I like the idea of having stuff. And the thing is I just like the idea of other people also having stuff.
Right.
It's just, it's, to me, I want to see that contradiction resolved, and I want to see us move to a higher stage of production so that we can reach a point of abundance, as opposed to I want to punish the bad capitalists.
Right.
I'm sure there's plenty of capitalists with very good intentions. I just disagree with what they're doing. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think I agree with you. So I always hate this argument that people make sometimes. Like, well, if the secretary makes $15 an hour, well, what about me? Like, meaning like, it's like, or if the McDonald's worker makes $15 an hour, then I only make 16. Why should they get that much? Basically, like, well, everyone should be poor because I'm poor. I think that's a horrible argument
crazy.
to make. I want everybody to be upgraded, not the other way around. So no, I agree with you on that premise. Sometimes there's this belief that if you're a socialist or libertarian socialist or something like that, you want everybody to be poor. It's not that. In fact, I want abundance. I don't. Exactly. Do you know the Venus Project, Jack Fresco?
I do. I consider it a little bit idealist in that it doesn't really have an addressing of that contradiction, but like that, yes, that is the right, in my opinion, the right impulse at very least.
Yeah. I guess the question for Jack is always, how do you get there?
Exactly.
And even when you ask him, I don't think he necessarily has an answer for how do you go from point A to point B.
Exactly.
Before I let you go, Peter, any predictions on the election? If you had to put your finger on it, I'm asking this question pretty much of everybody. Who do you think wins, and what do you think the electoral votes end up being?
I think he ends up winning by about 30 electoral votes. I don't know if he's going to win the popular. I'm not really 100% sure on that.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to win by about 30 electoral votes. I think he's going to get a couple of the key states that basically secure it. He might win the popular vote because, again, if we'd have talked about this exact same thing 5 days ago, we wouldn't have that little nosedive to account for with Kamala Harris. That is not good for her. Like, that's, over several days, that's a trend where it has just really gone bad. And I think, again, we talked about a lot of stuff. She's not doing anything publicity wise that just makes anybody care. And he is. So I think, to me, I look at it like, if he's not going to win the popular vote, it seems like he's probably done the work in the places that he needs to win. Like, there's a couple of states that are considered swing states that I don't think he'll get, but I think he's going to get most of them. It just doesn't look. I don't think he's going to get Michigan. I think I'm from Michigan, and I've been talking to people from Michigan over the last couple of weeks, and they seem pretty gung ho on Kamala.
Really?
People that, yeah, I was actually shocked by it. Other than the Muslim population is not going to vote Kamala,
Right.
but I think everybody else basically is. I don't know that. I think there's obviously a contingent of Republicans. If it goes red, I'll be a little bit surprised, but I also don't think he needs Michigan because I think he's going to get most of the swing states, and that's really what matters.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty wild, honestly. Like, they put up the worst possible fight like multiple times now. They put up the worst guy, and then they replaced him with the worst possible person. Like, anybody would have been better.
And by the way, undercut Sanders to do it. I mean, if you remember, the only reason Joe Biden is in is because they did everything in their power to basically get rid of Sanders. And so you have all of these people who jump out the race at the last minute, turned around, and Warren stays in and starts attacking Sanders as sexist and her supporters and all this other nonsense. And Sanders, there's this, I remember there's this article, I never forget it, where Sanders apparently was walking outside at night, shocked by the whole thing, thinking, maybe she's not as progressive as I thought. Like, he was bewildered.
Naive, but nice old man. Although he's really, in my opinion, gone off the deep end in supporting all of these people. I don't really like that. Obviously, like, he kind of has to. It's his party at this point, but I don't like it still. Because they basically screwed him. Like, it's insane that they wouldn't allow. Like, basically, Bernie Sanders is the platonic ideal of what they're supposed to be by the traditional view of what the Democratic Party is.
Exactly.
Now, there's plenty of criticism for what that is. It's definitely not enough in my eyes, but it would certainly be better. And a lot of people understood that. Like, Michigan went for Sanders in 2016 and went hard for Sanders in 2016. I mean, in doing what they've done, they've trained like the non-insane part of the Democratic base that they don't really care about what they're supposed to care about. Right. And I think that is a contributing factor in what I was talking about earlier with how the Democrats just project elitism. And then they say the opposite of us is Trump. And so the opposite of elitism has to be populism. And populism was what they called Bernie Sanders. And they told us that populism was bad, but Bernie Sanders wasn't bad. So maybe Trump isn't bad. Or maybe he's just a jackass that will screw everything up for him. I don't know. Like, really, frankly, like, I think a lot of people have about that thought process on the Democratic side. And in the more independent area, like, they don't trust anybody. They just hate the people who have been like they hate who is the most openly elitist for the most part. And it's clearly the Democrats. They do nothing at all to try to create a perception that they aren't elitist. Like that one thing where the people came into the Kamala rally and said something about Jesus. I don't remember what it was, but she goes, "Oh, you're at the wrong rally." And it's like, why would you say that? What is your problem? How do you not get this is a popularity contest? You are just crapping on people that you're asking to help you win the popularity contest. Christians, which is what like 70% of the country?
Of the country, yeah. Like, also, my point of view is I don't know who said this, but I think they're right. The failure of the center is the rise of the right, or the failure of the left is the rise of the right. Meaning, the only reason you get a figure like Trump is because either the center has failed to meet their obligations. The public was looking for something else. The center wasn't necessarily providing what they needed in regard to the political space. There's this political philosophy that says all things being equal, you want two parties that are close together, meaning you want them to be very similar. That way you can keep a consistency in regards to the politics of a nation. That way it doesn't take these huge swings left and right. By the same token, every so often you get a situation where that center fails miserably. And in that center failing, people start looking for other figures in order to create a new political alignment, whether that's a Sanders, whether that's a Trump. The Democrats had superdelegates so they could scrub out their, let's say, far figure, or the figure that people could go to in regards to their populists. Sure. Republicans had no such thing. Hence, Trump was able to basically take the mantle of the party because the public was looking for something different when the center failed to meet the obligations and responsibilities. So yeah, I agree with you on this. For all of the talk about how bad he is and everything else, it was their failure that effectively created him. Agreed.
Not even a question. Like, I just think that there's no real way that he could get there if, like, let's say Bernie Sanders won in 2016. Let's say they let him through and won. You and I would be having a completely different conversation right now.
Yeah.
I would probably be like, well, maybe this stuff can work because things are marginally better. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm a Marxist. I would obviously have criticism for him one way or the other, but I wouldn't be completely disillusioned with the idea of a political party. Like, there could be some improvement that happens that people would like, you know.
Right.
And that's not happening now. That's not going to be a thing that happens now. We're talking about how and I'm not going to say that like the Democrats are fundamentally different than the Republicans, but in aesthetic they are. Like, in aesthetic, these are it's red, blue. These are complementary colors on the color scale. They're exactly the opposite on the color scale. And aesthetically, everything follows that. They talk about issues a different way. They use a different tone of voice. They dress differently. They dress very professionally. They use very nice fonts. I like their fonts. I'm not going to say I don't like their fonts. I do, but but that's the difference. And in order to not have what they're doing, they needed to provide real material reasons that they're better than the other side.
Right.
And they could have with Bernie Sanders, and they didn't. They proved that they do not want to have material reasons, and that just disillusion. That like, I know that, etc. But there's also a lot of people who are just normal. Oh yeah, we are getting some lag there.
Oh no, you're fine. Keep going.
Okay. But yeah, there are more normal people who are registered Democrat than there are like hardcore extreme Democrats.
Right.
And the regular people, I mean, they know what they are Democrats for. They know the branding. They know all that stuff, and it's incongruent with, you know, what actually happens when you support them. Which is, I mean, that's the end of the political party in almost any historical situation. When it ceases to do what it claims it's doing, that's it. Like, what is there left for it to do? And that's not to say that I think the Republicans are fundamentally different, but to some extent, they are doing what they say that they're doing. In fact, they're actually being more honest about what they're doing, whether that's good or bad. But I mean, they deliver. It may not be that they deliver what we want, but they deliver what they say they're delivering. And it's.
Let me ask you this: do you think? I strongly think that Harris was hurt, and this can be the last question, that she was hurt not going through a primary. Like, you know, this oftentimes Democrats think that a primary process is somehow a bad thing. I don't think primary processes are bad things. I mean, the idea that you go for months arguing, debating, making your point, and the Democratic Party at that point becomes, okay, this is what people are talking about. This is what they're fighting over. This is what they're debating. And those ideas are seeding the public for weeks on end. And in seeding the public like that for weeks on end, it's not like people on stage are going to be radically different. You're effectively saying very similar things to the American public to kind of give this voice. This is what we believe in. This is what we believe in comparison to the other political party. Also, you would have had a much better chance of getting the strongest candidate available, as opposed to what ended up happening when you just chose Harris. Like, they did her no favors in the way that this outcome came out.
I think, a primary, it's just fundamentally better to have a primary. Like, you have, see, here's the reason why I think that a primary is at least, it's very imperfect because we have an imperfect voting system, but you at very least have a fair amount of variation in how a message is delivered and exactly what the focus is for each of these different candidates. And thus, in having that choice, you can actually build a consensus around a primary as to what matters. And it's not just about who the candidate is, it's about building that consensus. And they did not go through that process. Now, if they had gone through that process with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden, like, the reason why Joe Biden would have been the candidate again and would not have gone through a primary is because he went through a primary and they did that.
Right.
The thing is, Kamala, like, they just appointed her. And I don't know why. I still don't know why. Like, Joe Biden was a stronger candidate, in my opinion. And that is saying...
Wait, you said Joe Biden was a stronger candidate?
Yeah, I think they'd be doing better right now if they had just stuck with Biden. I think that...
Really?
I think that... Well, let me say this. I think that he has an excuse for every nonsense thing that he says. And he's at least somewhat consistent. She has a track record of being completely inconsistent, and she's incoherent for no reason.
The thing is, though, Joe Biden was getting beat by a landslide. Like, if you remember, they even thought the Republican Party was going to take the popular vote because of how bad Joe Biden was. And especially that debate was radically catastrophic. I mean, people saw that debate and thought to themselves, okay, this man can't run. I mean, sure. I don't know, man. I don't know if I agree with this one.
I get it. I get where you're coming from, because I do understand those things were very bad. But I also think, I mean, what has the apparatus done for Kamala? Like, Kamala doesn't have the liabilities that Joe Biden does, and is doing terrible. Like, has just run a crappy campaign. Joe Biden can run a better campaign than this, to be frank. Like, he's kind of running a better campaign than this, just sitting in his, I mean, aside from the garbage comment, but like when he was putting the Trump hat on and just kind of joking around, that's a better campaign than what Kamala Harris has run.
But Kamala Harris did herself no favors in this campaign either.
No.
Like, if you notice, in the very beginning, she had a glow. And the glow came from this idea that, okay, finally, we got something different. And of course, they looked at it and said, okay, well, she's a person of color. She's a woman. She's younger. She is everything different in the optic sense over Joe Biden. Meaning, he's old, he's decrepit, and everything else. In fact, Joe Biden's polling went up when he got out the race. And so I think the problem that Kamala Harris ran into is that when they asked her point blank, hey, what would you have done different than Joe Biden? I mean, because keep in mind, her theme is, I'm a new way forward. I'm something different. I'm not Joe Biden. I'm a new way forward. I'm something different. And they would say, so what would you have done differently over the course of this administration than Joe Biden? She says, I was in the room with these decisions, and I can't think of anything I would have done differently. They say, okay, what would you do different going forward? And she can't think of anything different. They would say, what would you do different on Israel? I can't think of anything different. So over and over and over again, when she's gone around the country and they've asked her, how would you be different? You get 60 to 80% of the country saying they want something different, that the country is going in the wrong direction. And Kamala Harris, on multiple occasions in big ticket venues, affirmed that there is no difference. It is just a difference purely from the context of optics. Meaning, on Boss with Kelsey Grammer, they used to have this saying, continuity on the inside, change on the outside. And that's effectively what it came across as. And I think when it became very clear that, oh, these people are basically the same, I think her campaign tanked.
I agree. I couldn't agree more, in fact. I think that it's that thing that I talked about a moment ago. Like, aesthetically, you have the one thing, and materially, you have another thing. Else, like, right. It's a complete betrayal of what it's supposed to be about. Like, aesthetically, you're seeing a completely different person. You're seeing somebody who's not old as hell. Like, just from the perspective of the last 3 elections, including this election, like the early stages of it, the last 3 of them have been between old people. Hillary Clinton is not young either. She was, I think, in her 60s, if I'm not mistaken, when in 2016. I think she's upper 60s now, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong.
No, Clinton's older than that.
She's older?
Clinton is.
Okay. Yeah. Well, she's older. I'm giving her more credit than I intended to. But my point is, it's been with old people, and Kamala Harris is not an old person. She's in her 50s, which is not like a spring chicken or anything, but that is a prime time for a thinker. Like, you have a lot of life experience, and you're still young enough that you're not really dealing with the liabilities that an elderly person, a senior, deals with. So in theory, aesthetically speaking, it should follow that she does have answers for those questions.
Right.
But she doesn't.
And by the way, just to be clear, Hillary Clinton is 77 years old. She's almost 80.
So, I mean, again, like, once again, I gave her more credit than I thought. Like, I thought she was like legally a senior citizen at the time of the last election, and then I didn't do any math, so I ended up giving her more credit than she needed.
Man, Peter, man, I've appreciated this conversation, man. I really appreciate this conversation.
I always have a good time talking to you, man.
Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin is a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In their book, Custom Reality and You, they explore reality where profit is the driving force. You can follow Peter on Twitter at Peter Coffin. Purchase their books on Amazon. And of course, the book that Peter, show that book for us again, please.
Also available as a free documentary on YouTube. Look up Horseshoe Theory is Right, but Not How You Think.
Badass Peter Coffin. Thank you very much. All right, guys, we have come to the end of the show. I got to be honest, I am dragging ass a little bit, fatigued. But before I end it, I want to give a shout out to everybody. Thank you all very much for supporting the show. I had been out of commission for a while, and I think I got a bit complacent when I started in the radio station. And I think this past 2 weeks, I've been far busier than I've been in a very, very long time, trying to get all of this together and get all of this set up. And as I pointed out, my objective is 40K by December, 40K by December. So like it, share it far and wide, give it to your mama, give it to your aunt, uncle, everything else. We're going to grow. Also, make sure you hit the subscription button, make sure you hit the notification bell, all of that good stuff. Just to go through before we end, Janice Anderson, Sabby Sabs from RBN, gave you a shout out last night on a podcast. Well, shout out back at Savvy. Again, love her stuff. And she has been on Fault Lines a few times. And so I deeply appreciate her. She's always welcome to come on the show anytime she wants to come on the show. We've had good conversations the last few times that we've talked. So she is more than welcome. Shout out to Savvy. Thank you for thinking about me, Sabs. Let's keep going. Nut 716. I don't see Kirk and Spock on that wall. Just teasing brother lunch on me. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Nut. Deeply appreciate it. Nut 716. JT, it's Wesley Walker. Oh, Wesley just changed the handle. Wesley, I remember you, Wesley. I remember you. I didn't know who Nut was. Wesley, I do remember. Thanks, man. You've been here for a long time. Wesley was here, Jesus, for years, even before I started Fault Lines. Wesley, thank you for staying, man. I really appreciate it. Diane Thomas, super sticker. Well, thank you, Mama Thomas. Much appreciated. The well-dressed nerd, the talk master, Neil Bortz would argue liberalism was always headed in this direction 15 years ago. I disagree, but today the proof is in the pudding. Brave, yes. Yeah, I heard it was, I don't know the guy's name, but I remember he was making this argument too about liberalism and how it was trending in this place. I would have never thought it. I mean, like I said, if you think about like the Noam Chomskys of the world, these guys were like free speech is a right, but this kind of allowing Nazis to protest, their right to do it, that type of stuff. Today, that's not it. If it's against their narrative, if it's something they don't necessarily like, they want to control the narrative. They want to control speech. They want to control dialogue. They want to be able to categorize stuff as misinformation because they just don't like the information. Don't get me wrong. Some people are going to say things that are off the wall and that are batshit crazy. But by the same token, things that are true. The Hunter Biden laptop was true. 50 intelligence officials said the laptop was fake. That was false. And yet they aired that. If that was true even before the election, that stuff was interfering with the election. If you go with unprovoked attack on Ukraine. Okay, well, was it unprovoked? That's a lie. NATO is Levin-light. Okay, well, it's not. It's a violent military organization. The kill squads in South America. Okay, we're going to drop context. We're not going to bring that up. Kim Jong-un is just a maniac firing missiles off in the Sea of Japan. Okay, maniac, maybe, maybe not, but he's not doing it unprovoked. And like the way the media repeats this stuff. And my deepest concern is that they are going to, anything that the government says, that's a lie. They would never call it a lie. They would never call it propaganda. Anything that you said that can test that narrative, they will definitely call that misinformation, even if it's true. So saying Joe Biden blew up Nord Stream. Well, Joe Biden was on TV saying if Russia goes in, the pipeline is going to blow up. This is, sir, how are you going to do that? That's not your pipeline. How do you plan on doing that? We will do it. And they turned to Schultz, who had the charisma of a used condom. And Schultz just stands there as the US president is effectively saying he's going to blow up their pipeline. Just utterly astonishing stuff. And then the pipeline blows up and they turn around and was like, we have no idea who did this. This is complete mystery. We have no idea how this happened. Maybe Russia blew up their own pipelines. And then they blame it on Ukraine. Oh, there's a bunch of guys in a dinghy. And as they're saying this, the European economy is being gutted. Because whereas before they were able to get this energy for a decent price, it ended up being the situation where not only is it not a decent price now, they're paying 4 times more for the same energy they were getting before from Russia. Meaning the European economy and Europe being this garden, as they call it, it was only able to be this garden because of the cheap energy that they were able to get. And we push Europe to pass all of these sanctions and everything else that effectively decimated the economies of Europe. When the US goes around and says, well, we have the strongest economy in the world, they're saying that knowing full well that their policy gutted and destroyed Germany. And to make this point that much clearer, you realize Nord Stream wasn't necessarily in the public eyesight, meaning it wasn't something that the public was paying all that much attention to going back in the past, but it was something that the US was paying attention to, hated the pipeline, because from the US point of view, the pipeline connected Russia and Europe, or Russia and Germany, in a way that the US was uncomfortable about. And to be honest, it shows up this argument that somehow Russia is a threat. I mean, after all, if you're getting your energy from this particular country, do you really believe they're a threat? You're linked. And Russia would not have been a threat had not for NATO continued to expand to their borders, something that we ourselves wouldn't tolerate. I mean, we've had the Cuban Missile Crisis in this country where the Soviet Union was putting weapons and missiles in Cuba. We flipped out. They're trying to tell me that if Russia put missiles in Mexico, had special forces, had agents, had the KGB, had all of these organizations in Mexico, and then start raising an army and the military on the Mexican border, and you had all of these people who clearly hated America, do you really honestly believe that the United States would be like, well, Mexico can do whatever it wants? Mexico is a sovereign country. If Mexico wants to put missiles and military on the border, they can do that. We don't have an issue with that. We're not going to get involved. Or do you think the U.S. would lose its goddamn mind and potentially, most likely, invade Mexico? I'm telling you, it's the latter. We were willing to end the world over the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then we turn around and we're shocked that Russia takes aggressive action, that you're trying to militarily surround it with these NATO countries. It's outrageous. You knock over the government of Ukraine, meaning you have a hostile military takeover of a government that's on the Russian border. B, you build up a military. You start killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians to the tune of 14,000 because they take issue with the fact that you've overthrown their government and they decide we don't want to be part of this Nazi-led government, this Banderite fascist regime. We don't want to be a part of this. In which case, the Ukrainian government starts killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians in this kind of civil war. Meaning, they lie continuously when they discuss this issue. It's aggravating to me. It's like you're walking through a fog where they come out with a certain narrative of events in order to cover the fact that they've gotten hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians killed for purely geopolitical reasons. It's just frustrating. It's aggravating. I'm sorry. Wesley Walker, as a union worker, I work a lot of overtime, Jamal. Just saying. Wesley, thank you. I appreciate it. Always appreciate it, Wesley. Let's keep going. MEK Stooge, Rudy Giuliani lied about Reagan saying we should always have Israel's back. Reagan figuratively told Israel to fuck off at least twice during his presidency. That is so true. If you remember, Eisenhower at one point told them to stand down. In fact, this was during the Suez Canal crisis, if I'm not mistaken. Nasser, Egyptian president, where Israel had these secret plans with the UK in order to attack and take the Suez Canal. Whereas Eisenhower believed that it was going to turn the Middle East against the U.S. and the West broadly, in which case he made Israel stand down. Reagan did the exact same thing. I forget the exact conflict, but I remember at some point Reagan turned around and was like, wow, I didn't realize I had that power to do that. Yes, you do. We have funded 70% of the war effort in Israel. 70%. Think about that money. 70% of all the death, killing, slaughter, we have funded to the tune of 70%. So, yes, if we say stop, it stops. Sparky, I've always said that Joe Biden is the most competent person in his administration. Okay. Sparky, keep in mind, Israel has killed many more Americans than Iran has. Remember the USS Liberty. Well, there's that. Many people may not know that story. That Israel attacked a U.S. warship, USS Liberty, knew it was an American ship, and America covered it up. To this day, they don't bring that up. I mean, they basically swept that under the rug, which is astonishing. Sparky, every time someone says Israel is our only friend in the Middle East, I can't help but think before we had no enemies in the Middle East, the U.S. missionary John Sheehan. And you're right. I mean, if you think about it, Israel is the irritant in the Middle East. They are our settler colonial state that's in that region of the world. And as a settler colonial state in that region of the world, as it steals land, as it as it makes the situation of those people living in that area worse. Yeah, it antagonizes people in the region who A, don't think they should be there, and B, could see exactly what they're doing to the Palestinian population that they're occupying. They can see it directly. When you're traveling through the Middle East, it is clear as day. We hide a lot of the stuff that shows up here. It is in their media. So, Sparky, you're absolutely right. Israel is not my responsibility. I'm an American. I care about American concerns. And if we have a situation where they are creating a crisis point for us in the Middle East, or for that matter, brokering a larger war, then we shouldn't be involved. And Joe Biden should be strong enough to have a bit more courage to be able to call and say, cut the shit out. Correction, at least 2 times in a major way. Reagan figuratively told Israel to go fuck itself, probably many times in a minor way. There is that. All right, guys. We have come to the end of the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I want to thank all of you for joining me. A jam-packed show for today. I appreciate all of the help that you guys give. I appreciate the attention, and I appreciate you joining me. 7 to 10, Monday through Friday. This voice in your ear. Like it, share it, subscribe to it. Give it to any and everybody who you think might be interested to it. Share it on your social media platforms. Do all that stuff. I pop in all times of the day and night, so you may see me, most likely will see me later today. By the way, on Monday, Richard Wolff is going to be on the show. And I think I may even be getting Glenn Decent to come on the show next week also. I have some really good guests lined up for next week. Some serious, heavy experts on the field of Russia, or for that matter, international relations. So definitely stay tuned for Monday. You're not going to want to miss that show with Richard Wolff. And again, I think Glenn Decent, but we'll see. All right. I'm going to say like, share, subscribe, and you guys have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Show, signing off. Have a good one all.